What's a dumb local rumor you heard as a kid that turned out to be true? The US Midwest. Rumor has it that up the old road out of town, somewhere in the woods, was a satanic cult that held seances and other mystical rituals by firelight. It scared the willies out of us kids, and our parents wouldn't let us ride our bikes anywhere on that road. Decades later, I was working on a commissioned history project for the town and talked to the old man who owned the oldest homestead in the country, way back in the woods along that road. While photographing the creek that ran through the stone foundation basement of the home, which the settlers used for water generations ago, I noted the burnt-out tea candles everywhere. Guy lit up and said, yeah, back in his younger days, he and his wife used to host elaborate costume parties at the property, often by candlelight for the fun of it. He had heard rumors of the satanic cult and thought it was hilarious, so he and his friends ran with it and held parties in monks' robes and had bonfires and lived it up. He still laughs about it, and now so can I. This older kid had this lightning streak scar all over one side of his neck and down his body. The rumor was he was throwing stuff at the power lines behind our neighborhood. Turns out he was. He was throwing copper wire at them and it arced. He's lucky to be alive. A vagrant-looking man used to collect cans from local parks and whatnot. Imagine someone pushing a shopping cart in tattered clothing. Rumor was that he was generationally wealthy, and when he passed away, he left a fortune to the Parks and Rec department to update facilities. We used to have a local homeless lady, supposedly a Vietnam Army nurse. Her experiences there ruined her, and she refused help from her wealthy family. It was all rumors, though, until she passed. Her family turned out to be the people who owned Utz potato chips. They paid for her funeral since now she wasn't around to refuse any money or help anyone. This is a little more lighthearted, but when I was in elementary school, probably like 3rd grade, all the kids in my class would joke about how our primary teacher and our Spanish teacher liked each other. We were all little kids, so of course it was just a dumb little kids joking around thing. That is, until a few years later when I was in middle school and I found out my old teacher and Spanish teacher recently got married. Thank you for posting the story of a cute little after-school romance blossoming into a marriage. And there was another one to immediately follow that story. Yeah, this happened to me twice. I think my radar for teacher romances was excellent. My grade 5 teacher was a very awkward man. Kind, but weird. We had a substitute teacher every once in a while who was recently divorced. A stunning lady with her 3-piece outfits, sculpted cheekbones, and big eyes. I swore in grade 6 that they were dating, but I couldn't prove it, and no one would believe me. That is, until my oldest was in grade 1 and I was in the class to ask the teacher a question. I realized immediately that this was Mrs. Y, my substitute from 20 years earlier, and that she'd in fact been dating and then married my grade 5 teacher. Then there was the high school one. My advanced math teacher was an awkward woman, kind of geeky but weird. We also had a substitute teacher who was geeky but tall and handsome with gorgeous blonde hair. For a reason you'll see soon, we'll call him Mr. X. I was in an all-girls high school, so girls being girls, we all fawned over him. By grade 11, I swore that their casual chit-chat in the hallway was making date plans after school, but I still couldn't prove it either. Part of my stand-up bit for a grade 12 Frosh week was introducing teachers to the new students, and I welcomed those teachers as Mr. and future Mrs. X. A few years later, they were married. Both couples are still happily together. The first couple are now enjoying retirement. In 2008 or so, a guy we knew was shot at the park by adult substance dealers. The news and reports stated that he was a kingpin in the green herb trade and had made tens of thousands before getting popped. His parents denied, of course, until investigation found out that he started selling to pay his parents' mortgage, and he had in fact been selling large quantities of green herb. The park we used to play football at used to be a cemetery. They'd exhumed all the coffins and moved them years before I was born. We'd freak each other out, especially at night, saying there were still bodies buried there. One day we were playing and they were doing some groundskeeping work and they found a coffin. The state came out and found 30 more. We were actually playing on top of hallowed ground. I'd heard about 2 different teachers at my high school being creepy, and they've both since been fired for inappropriate contact with students. There was a rumor at my high school that the building down the way was a cult. It wasn't unheard of to dare people to go over there, and then you'd end up being followed or sometimes invited to dinner. Turns out it was the HQ of the cult the Duggars were in, the Institute in Basic Life Principles. I was watching that documentary and my mind was blown, because all of the high school rumors had been true. There was a taco truck in town that sold green herb if you asked for a side of lettuce. I hope everyone who asked was actually hoping for the devil's lettuce instead of iceberg, because it was true. There was this jerk in my junior high gym class, a real bully type, and when he'd act out, everyone would ridicule him for his mother being a smack-using working girl, and we'd laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. Well, it turned out it was true. There was public confirmation in the paper, and his bullying made a lot more sense because it turned out his home life was what you'd expect from someone having a mother like that, and no one talked about it anymore, and we didn't laugh so much. Ironically, I think he felt so ashamed when everyone found out, he actually stopped being such a jerk. When I was a child, we had the legend of the Baroness. Supposedly, she lived in a haunted house and drove around a pink hearse. When I was old enough to drive and explore on my own, I finally saw her, in her pink hearse. She also lived in a house that would have coded as spooky or haunted to a small child. It was just an old house with neat architecture. That there was a secret cult in one of the neighborhoods. Turned out to be true. It was NXIVM, a cult. That if you rode bikes or four-wheelers down a certain trail, an old man would come after you and attack you. A few years later, some people were riding four-wheelers down the trail, and an old guy shot and killed them both. Damnedest thing, they'd already left his property before he caught up to them, and he killed them on public land. I'm pretty sure he died in prison a few years ago. There was a kid in my middle school class who was a real jerk to everyone, struggled through simple classwork, and was good at sports but fought so much they'd hardly let him play. One day he pushed it too far, and the whole class decided to mock him for the jersey he wore to school every day, and how he only wore undershirts and the same 2 pairs of pants. No gym clothes either, and a ratty pair of shoes. Turns out his parents were alcoholic crap piles, and he lived with his very old grandmother and basically raised himself. Couldn't afford clothes and barely got enough from her social security to feed the both of them. Found out when me and a couple of friends found him sobbing in the bushes after school because he didn't want to go home and worry his gran. Some guys ended up buying him some clothes and helped him get some cleats to play soccer. My mum let me buy him lunches on my account too, since the free school lunch was basically a piece of bread with a half slice of cheese and a wilted apple. The guy is a financial manager now and doing pretty well. Rumor about a local businessman who tried to end it all and was rescued. Some weeks later, he ran into a burning building and rescued 2 young children, sustaining severe burns in the process. A few months ago, I saw him in the pub on the green. All the skin on his face and hands had melted, and he had skin grafts everywhere. Happiest man in the pub. What a hero! That our neighbor was an unspeakable act offender of the worst sort. Married with kids, too. Sadly, it turned out to be true. One day he dropped dead of a heart attack, and when the family started going through his stuff, they were so disgusted apparently they just sold the house as is, with the furniture and everything. Always heard rumors that this kid who I rode BMX with, his dad was a high-ranking member of the Hells. One day we were over, years later, talking crap around the fire in his backyard, and about 70 patched members arrived at the house for a meeting. They brought us a crap load of beer and told us to find a park to drink it in for the next few hours while they had their meeting. Not gonna lie, if someone's dad did that for our group of friends, we'd think they were the coolest kid in school afterwards. Also, it's a little funny that these guys got you out of their hair by getting you to go do illegal underage drinking somewhere else. They probably could have just told you to leave and you'd be so scared that you'd do it. I have 2, both about elderly men. First, there was an elderly man that could be seen walking all over town. Long grey beard, usually seen in tattered clothes. Walking Man or the Silver Bullet were nicknames for him. The rumor was that he was actually really wealthy, but lots of people just assumed he was homeless because he was always walking, carrying groceries or whatever. Well, about a year before he passed away, it came out that he was actually one of the wealthiest residents in our town when he donated millions to local youth programs and schools. Turns out he just liked walking a lot and placed no value on material things like clothes and cars. Second, there was an elderly man who was actually homeless. The rumor was that he drank himself crazy some years back and just never got help. He was in and out of jail a bunch but always seemed to be given some slack by law enforcement. The truth is tragic. He did indeed drink himself crazy, but out of necessity. He was a paramedic. One night he responded to a wreck that turned out to be his wife and daughter. They'd been hit by a distracted driver speeding on a narrow road. Neither survived. Understandably, he was never okay after that. He'd sometimes check the pizza shop I used to manage for spare slices. Broke my heart that all I could really do was offer him some free pizza. I hope you rest in peace now, Red. A kid in my 3rd grade class was always late to school. I'm talking he showed up to school 5 minutes before classes were released to go home once. The rumor amongst parents and teachers was that his mum was an alcoholic and the dad lived a couple of towns over. So he often had to wait for his dad to take him or care for his mum until she was well enough to drive. This was a private school with no bus, by the way. She died of liver failure a few months ago, according to Facebook. It makes it so much more messed up that everyone knew, including a teacher, and didn't have any sympathy for him. I distinctly remember the teacher telling him on multiple occasions that it was his responsibility to show up on time. He was 8. Was he supposed to drive himself? It makes me so sad. I hope he's doing okay now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. That a quiet and polite guy we knew growing up was a murderous and ruthless gang leader. We used to go to his parties. We saw him out on the town and always exchanged pleasantries. We would see him at the bar and there was little indication that he wasn't to be messed with until one day we bumped into him in a parking lot. Again, just exchanging pleasantries. How are you? What's going on this weekend? Stuff like that. A truck pulled up a couple of spots over from us. This guy goes, "Hold on just a sec," and calmly walked over to talk to the guy. A short conversation ensued and he opened the door and started just pummeling the guy. Like on top of him in the driver's seat, punching down. We were stunned. After a short while, he got out of the truck and walked back to calmly finish his conversation with us like nothing had happened. We saw the truck pull away, so the guy lived. A few years afterwards, more rumors surfaced about him, and it made sense that they were true, until one day his arrest made international headline news. He received a heavy sentence for a ton of different crimes, likely won't ever be free, and his affiliates are still doing business. There was a summer camp in East Tennessee that my scout troop used to go to that was out of council, so we had to be invited. And there was this hike that was part of the first year's class, a class that was pretty much how not to die at summer camp. It took you to this beautiful overlook that gave you gorgeous views of the valley and the part of the Appalachians we were in. The thing is, this overlook was outside of camp property, or so we were told, so they had to get permission every time they took the kids out of there, and the area was strictly off limits to everyone. Of course, rumors and legends were everywhere in this camp, and being the mid-2000s, one of them was that if you went to the overlook at night, the lights in the valley below spelled gay. Keep in mind, gay was a funny word back then, and everything among middle and high school boys was called gay. Now, we'd heard this legend for years, and one year, due to the shenanigans my troop got up to, we were told we wouldn't be invited back the following year. So, a couple of my friends got together on the last night of camp and said, "You know what? If we don't go tonight, we'll never be able to confirm or deny the legend, so let's sneak out and put this thing to rest." So, we snuck out after lights out, took the 2 or 3 mile hike to get out to the overlook, and I swear, right hand to God, the lights below actually spelled out in messy but clearly legible letters, capital G, capital A, capital Y. We all just kind of stood there for a few minutes in stunned silence because absolutely none of us expected it to be even partially true. And I'm sure no one believed us when we told them and thought we were perpetuating a lie. But I swear it actually said that. Everyone at my school knew someone else who told them that this one house just down the road from the school was owned by a locally known substance dealer, and it was his emergency hideout house. Years later, I was driving past and laughed at how ridiculous the story was. And 2 weeks after that, the house was on the news with armed police surrounding it. Turns out it really was this substance hideout, and the guy was involved in way more stuff than just that. They found substances, weapons, and evidence of a human trafficking ring right in there. The house got mysteriously burned down while this court case was going on and has been a burned-out, empty lot ever since. The 2 women in their late 40s were actually homosexual. Everyone on our street believed them when they told everyone they were sisters. I used to run errands for them maybe 3 times a week, and they always gave me a shilling every time. Well, given that shillings were phased out in the UK at least in the 1970s, it probably makes sense that they'd pretend to be roommates or sisters or whatever for the time. It's a damn shame they had to hide who they were, but it's not the first time the narrator has heard of a story like this. The kids would tell stories, and one that reaccrued was about the young woman that killed her parents with scissors. In a town of 300 in an isolated area, nothing ever happened, so even as a kid it was easy to dismiss. My senior year, my class found out that our teacher told us all the details. He was the only person in the county with a color camera, so he was drafted as the official crime scene photographer. It was during a cold snap, so at the same time state police arrived, the scene was frozen. The temperature was so low that our teacher's camera froze up and he had to fake it, then return later with the sheriff to retake the pictures. The girl had a home life that I can only describe as horrific for a number of reasons. So one night she did them in their sleep, with a pair of scissors. She dragged the bodies to the garage and attempted to burn them, but the only thing she had that was combustible was some perfume. She then came up with a story and ran to the neighbors. Turns out she was sent to the state mental hospital. It was a local urban legend that this huge, old, abandoned house was haunted because like a century ago there was a murder there. Kids would freak each other out over it, tell ghost stories, sneak into the property, whatever. I thought it was just that, an urban legend about an abandoned house. Nope. In the early 1900s, the husband and wife were found dead in the house. It was never solved, but the son was suspected because he was missing and never found. No one moved into it after that, and it's sat empty ever since. I only found out because they planned to tear it down to build apartments on the property 2 years ago, but the local community rallied to preserve it. That tight biking turn at the bottom of the hill everyone called Dead Man's Curve because someone died there? Someone did indeed die there. The rumor that our local China buffet was using illegal immigrants as waitstaff and then trafficking them across town to a massage parlor that they owned. It was true. Huge scandal when it happened, but it was hushed up pretty quickly. The restaurant reopened some months after under new management. A kid at my school whose mum disappeared when he was a baby was rumored that she was killed by Ted Bundy. Decades later, researchers think it's actually true. When I was a little kid, like 7, and roaming around the neighborhood with my gang of little rascals, this was in the 50s when kids could safely play outside all day with their pals without parental worry, there was a rumor that in the house 2 doors over from mine that the parents had locked their mentally handicapped kid in the attic and that he was one of my gang friends' older brothers. We played with him, but he always denied that he had any siblings. We were never allowed to enter his house, which was strange because we were always stopping at our other friends' homes during our days to drink water or use the bathroom. About 2 years later, the boy and his family moved away never to be seen again. But when they moved, it was discovered that yes, an older brother did exist, and he was kept locked away in the attic. It was a very creepy discovery. Mental health awareness and acceptance was in the dark ages in the 1950s. I grew up where there were some signs of Native Americans. I started believing that this one particularly beautiful spot had to be sacred and probably was a burial ground. I'd convinced my friends to hold hands in a circle and try to commune with the dead. After I got a bit older, I was super embarrassed that I'd ever done such things. A few years later, a Native American came by and told us how sacred the land was that we owned, and asked permission to hold peyote rituals with his tribe and others on our land. To this day, they still come out and set up a teepee and drum all night, especially flying on hallucinogenics. Turns out I was right. There was a teacher at my school that kids would claim was insanely rich, like that he lived in a giant mansion near the oceanfront and he only taught because he just genuinely loved being a teacher. He was pretty private, so he'd always say, "You shouldn't ask people about their finances," when kids would just ask him. So senior year, he has the seniors over for a year-ends award ceremony and superlatives type dinner deal. Yep. Super rich and lived in a huge mansion by the ocean. Said he inherited all his money from his parents, and I think he said he had a sibling or two that got written out of the will for being crappy, so he didn't have to share it. Became a teacher out of college, and then when his parents died, he inherited everything. He just kept teaching because he liked it. We had a rumor about there being a white horse in the woods behind the movie theater in our town. There were a couple of homeless people living there though, so no one went and checked them out. Well, before seeing a movie one day, me and a couple of friends decided to make the trek. We stumbled past a makeshift camp, found a small path that led to a fence. We stood there for a couple of seconds and then seemingly out of nowhere, a majestic white steed came trotting towards us. We snapped a quick pic on an early 2000s cell phone of our friend and the horse and got the heck out of there. The picture absolutely looked fake and no one believes us about it to this day. I am personally mortified that you found American shadow facts and didn't immediately go on a quest to tame the Lord of all horses. Although for all we know, one of those guys you assumed was a homeless person was actually a wizard. The differences between Gandalf the Grey and a homeless man are fewer than you think. It would also explain why he was there and why nobody ventured into the woods. There was an unmarked graveyard in the field across the road in rural Canada. The oldest guy in the area talked about there being one somewhere in the area, but he wasn't sure where. Maybe 10 years ago, an older gentleman, maybe in his 70s, came over to our house when I was home from college and asked who owned the property across the road. He said his family lived in the area over 100 years ago and he was looking for the family burial plot. He asked for permission to search and spent time with dowsing rods in the field, maybe 75 acres total, but he was focused closer to the road. He marked over 15 spots that he said were places where bodies were buried underground, and that he could tell by the way the rods moved if it was male, female, or a child. He even showed us how the rods would be still, but when he walked over the spots he marked, they would cross or move away from each other. He came back the next year and spent some money getting a big stone and a nice custom plaque made to mark this spot. He probably spent $1,000 or more on that, including renting a backhoe and operator. Then we never saw him again. We used to play hide-and-go-seek at night, but we'd never go to that area where he placed the markings because it felt eerie and sometimes it would be foggier. After he showed us the dowsing rods thing that one day, I told my younger cousin to lay on the ground so I could try it on him. I walked over him with the dowsing rods and nothing happened, so I said, "Well, guess you haven't got a soul," and walked back to the house. Overthinkers. What was your most satisfying "told you so" moment? My boyfriend, who has zero history of seizures, narrowly escaped dying from one because my overthinking led me to break into his house when he didn't answer the phone. My overthinking had begun a few nights prior. He mentioned that he bit his tongue in his sleep and woke up with a bloody pillow and sore mouth, but he had no memory of it happening. That, for some reason, led my overthinking brain to question, wow, did he have a seizure and just not realize it? He has zero history of seizures, and we'd been together multiple years. Didn't live together but spent nights together. And I had never seen a hint of a seizure. But for some reason, this stuck in my mind. Fast forward 2 days. We usually don't hang out in the morning because he likes to sleep in late. But on this day, we had an appointment to go and see a specific dog at the shelter that I was thinking of adopting. He wouldn't answer the phone that morning. I called multiple times before I went to his place, but he never picked up. I started getting a bad feeling, but I quelled the "he's having a seizure" thought because that was so clearly unlikely, and meanwhile I was making an action plan for that very scenario. I got to his house and he wouldn't answer, so in a completely not me crazy girlfriend move, I climbed over his fence. Luckily, his door was unlocked. I found him unconscious and unresponsive, lying on his back with the sticky remnants of foam all around his mouth. I jumped into action. I rolled him on his side to help curb aspiration, put a pillow under his shoulder to keep him in that position, and called the ambulance. Had I not hopped the fence to get in? Had I not driven over when he didn't pick up the phone? Had we not had plans to meet up hours earlier than we usually did? He would have been dead by lunch. His kidneys were already shutting down by the time we reached the ER. If he had never mentioned biting his tongue in his sleep, I don't think I would have been overthinking at all. No crazy worries about seizures would have pushed me to go over the edge and find him. Turns out to be a weird brain disease that's bizarrely endemic to New Mexico. Kind of cerebral cavernous malformations. Several days later, after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from a friend who said the dog, against all odds, was still at the shelter, as in the very dog we were supposed to be seeing that day. I'd given up hope on getting her and pushed it out of my priorities while my boyfriend was hospitalized, but they'd forgotten to take down my 24-hour hold sign on her cage, so no one inquired about her. She's now our miracle dog and is the sweetest animal I've ever owned. My boyfriend wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't made an appointment to meet her. Is this going to be that category of video that turns us all into paranoid weirdos? Because if there are more stories like this, my head is going to be on a fricking swivel and interpreting any physical irregularities in my friends as grave medical conditions. I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I've sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. I worked weddings for a while, during an age, 26 to 28, where a lot of my friends were getting married. I've helped to bustle pretty much every bride whose wedding I attended, including brides who I didn't know very well, who were either friends of my husband or were getting married to a groom that I was close friends with. At work, I had one of those craft supply organizers full to the brim of emergency supplies, pins, safety bobby and straight pins, hair ties, earring backs, a sewing kit, pain relievers, Tums, and granola bars. Sometimes you just need to get the bride to eat something. Chalk works great for covering up minor stains on white dresses, hairspray, makeup remover wipes, superglue, band-aids, blister bandages, you name it. People were always pleasantly surprised when they needed something random, and I was just like, yep, I've got that, here you go. All the teachers at the middle school I taught at knew that I was a pack rat, and one day a kid split his pants, and the school counselor came to me and said, "Mr. Smith, would you happen to have a pair of sweats or gym pants in your truck?" Yep. So the kid spent the rest of the day in a pair of nylon pants I had behind my seat. He's lucky, because if he didn't fit, he would have spent the rest of the day in a white disposable coverall in case I had car trouble in nice clothes. The icing on the cake, it was a student I really liked who was super helpful to other kids and teachers, so it was nice to do something nice for him. I also carried a Swiss Army brand soft-side briefcase stuffed with a few of each size of every battery. One day, Phil Niekro and two Braves players were there for an assembly and Phil's mic battery was dying, so I sprinted upstairs to my classroom, grabbed a 9-volt from my bag, and then basically rolled across the panel and switched out his battery and got back to the PA, avoiding getting on TV news cameras. I was at one of those trampoline parks with my kid when I looked over and saw several of the workers attending to an elderly lady sitting on the floor. It turns out she'd taken a shot to the forehead somehow and was bleeding profusely. They were trying to help with paper towels. Well, I'd taken a free local Stop the Bleed class, just in case, and I've since kept supplies in my truck. I asked if they needed some gauze and a bandage and went and got it and brought it back. I told the guy, now, if one piece of gauze fills up, and he interrupted, take it off and put on a new one. And I said, no, you put another one over top that one but leave the bottom one there. And he said, well, you know more than I do. Come over and help. And we were able to get her patched up. If anyone else wants to take a 90-minute Stop the Bleed class, they're free and likely in your local area. Stay safe out there, guys. I didn't actually plan for this, it just worked out. But one day, for some reason, I put a suction cup in my pocket. I don't exactly remember why, it was from a shower hook that I think I broke, and I put it in my pocket hoping to find a replacement or something else. Later that day, I was standing around with a few friends, and one friend was lamenting that his bumper was dented. He showed us and said, I bet I could pop it right out if I had like a suction cup or something. I wordlessly pulled the suction cup out of my pocket and handed it to him. Everyone definitely thought I was creepy as heck. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night, when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. Imagine how the guy who wanted to go home felt when he broke the hourglass and suddenly there was another one, especially after hitting the very first one. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I bought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many. But the mum sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers, not even halfway through the flight, and I gave her a few. Ah yes, the little brown fountains never let up below a certain age. I was kinda shaken when my friends told me how quickly they went through one big pack. New parents, you're truly living through your own version of the Blitz every day. It's just that what's raining down against you is more liquid. This was at 9 years old. We'd driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar Fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst and packed up all of my clothes and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night, the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, "The fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate?" At this point, we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies as we were about to lock the doors and drive, and then I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone for a long enough time that my pigs wouldn't have made it without feeding. In short, I helped save my family and pets from a fire because I was an anxious child. Jeez, you were a smart 9-year-old. When September 11th happened, my brother, who was 5 at the time, began packing a bag in case we had those kinds of people attack us. He packed the essentials like his teddy bears, a VHS copy of The Phantom Menace, his favorite toy cars, and a random book my dad was reading. He would have single-handedly saved Western civilization. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've never told anyone this, but when I was in middle school and going through puberty, I used to be terrified of popping a stiff one and my fly being down accidentally. Like, I would be up in front of the class and then randomly get solid and it would just pop out my fly, in front of the whole class. It's making me laugh just typing this out. You know that episode of South Park where Jimmy keeps getting randomly rigid? That was basically my life. Usually I would just tuck it in my waistband and wait for the storm to settle, but I still had a huge fear of it popping out my fly because I forgot to zip it up. So what did I do? I started wearing my boxers backwards, so that even if I forgot to zip up my fly, my eggplant wouldn't be exposed. It was a pain to use the urinals, but honestly, I got used to it pretty quickly. Flash forward a couple of months and I was at the movies with a big gathering of people. It was basically a big group of girls and my group of guy friends. Each guy and girl were paired up and made sure to sit next to each other. I was paired with a girl I had a huge crush on. We shared a popcorn and soda and it was a huge moment for me. Briefly into the movie, I got one of those damn random rock-hard Richards and I quickly but discreetly stood up and did the old waistband tuck. Then I sat back down and I could feel it pop out through my zipper. Thankfully, my backwards boxers kept it from saying hello to my date, but I still panicked and had to cover it up in a hurry. She noticed, I think, but we can all agree that a 6th grade boy's upright Johnson hiding under a layer of underwear is better than just sprouting out bare in the middle of a crowded movie theater. Also, she never said anything to her friends about it. Shout out to Stephanie for not mocking me with her friends. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day, the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year, before any of the pandemic stuff happened, I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we'd lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this kind of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. I'm also a germaphobe, so I already stockpiled masks, gloves, Lysol wipes, and hand sanitizer. In college, on occasion, upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen's towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the RA undressed. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop-ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later, I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my ceiling stash. That is such a specific thing to be paranoid about and prepared for, but what do I know, I guess, because you were able to actively save yourself from some embarrassment. They either thought that you were a fricking magician or that you carried 2 towels into the shower. I carry a fire extinguisher in my automobile. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You can never tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost, and he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate his statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila! I was able to produce a shrink-wrapped deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice too. I found a nickel-sized lump on my 15-month-old daughter's temple. I freaked out, obsessed over it, researched it exhaustively, and concluded that it was a dermoid cyst that had worn through the skull. I was told by a pediatrician that it was a bone bruise that would fix itself over the course of 3 to 6 months. No imaging was needed, and I shouldn't make an appointment at the children's hospital because it would resolve on its own. I got an X-ray done anyway, and the radiologist confirmed every one of my suspicions, but the pediatrician still said to wait and see because that's what you do with dermoid cysts, and it was definitely not through the skull despite what the radiologist said. Made an appointment at the hospital anyway, and the surgeon swore up and down that although it was a dermoid cyst as I'd suspected, it would not be through the skull, since in all of his years of practice it never had been. Well, guess what? It was through the skull, and it was pressing on the membrane between the skull and the brain. A hair's breadth from breaking the membrane or pressing on the brain. A couple more weeks of waiting, and my daughter would have had seizures, a brain infection, and lasting damage. I overthought it, and now she's a happy, healthy 3-year-old. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old daughter's finger at a park, completely cut off the circulation. Also, the other kid's mum was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. One time, I way overthought a concern I had around dryer vent fire. When the time came that we had a clog and didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was fricking ready. To add, I did clean the lint trap religiously. I just had a gut feeling. I bought one of those things from Amazon to clean it and nothing came out, so don't let that fool you. If your drying times are up and there's sometimes a smell, call someone or check out every possible location. We found basically Brillo pads of burnt hair inside the heating element. Stay safe, pals. I'm an amateur clarinetist. I've played in the local orchestra and the like. My son was in the high school band, he also plays clarinet. Prior to a football game at the warm-up area, he called me as I was about to head to the game, saying that someone in his section had a problem with their instrument. So did I have a loner? Now, the thing about being a clarinet player is that everyone you know calls you every time they see a cheap plastic clarinet for sale at a garage sale or the like. So over the years, especially when my son was in junior and senior high, when I saw one of those for $50 or $100, I grabbed it. Didn't happen every day, but at the peak of my collection, I had a couple of beta plastic clarinets in addition to the pretty good wooden one my son played. And Lord knows that I wouldn't trust anyone with my good clarinets in the brass band or the one that I used in the orchestra. So I grabbed both of my plastic ones, which actually played okay, and I brought them. I pulled the one I thought was the better of the two out of the car and gave it to my son's friend. Meanwhile, he says, "Hey, another person ran into a problem, and I got the second clarinet out of the car." "How many clarinets do you have?" was my son's question. It was a proud moment. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid, I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do stuff with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult, I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could still do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, which opened locked cars. I carry one in my car and I've been able to help no less than 10 people who've locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needed something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car and I was able to drive over and help. Also, I have jumper cables that have helped a few stranded drivers start their car. My goodness, I mean, good for you? But it's a little concerning that there's apparently a universally effective and commercially available product that can get cars open that easily. Does every carjacker know about it? Great to be prepared and have one in your garage, I guess, but don't go getting ideas, car thieves. Getting lost in a foreign country, relying on my phone's GPS to navigate, and the data stops working. I'd over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. I'm basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago, and I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken. No idea how it happened. And I finally got the chance to break out my backup pair. When I was 11, I always kept approximately 12 to 15 of some combination of pens, pencils, and markers in my pant pocket. I just liked having options and never knew what I was going to need to write on. Sometimes I got side-eye from other kids though. Cut to, at a weekend camp with a bunch of kids. I'm participating in a sort of scavenger hunt race thing. At one point, our team hits this task where everyone has to draw or write something. I don't really remember. But there's only 2 pens, about 10 people per team, and another team just showed up. With 1 pen assigned to each team, it was going slowly until, you get a pen, you get a pen, everyone gets a pen. Our team screams through the task because we can all write simultaneously, while the other team's left plodding along with their 1 pen. We eventually win. Who's weird now? For those concerned about cheating, I do believe the lack of pens was oversight by the event planners, not a deliberate means of handicapping teams. There was a staff member monitoring that particular station and they didn't intervene. Our victory was sanctioned and still stands. Some other people have expressed concerns over the possibility of my getting impaled by all these writing utensils. Rest assured that this 100% has happened to me. I have absolutely impaled legs and fingertips multiple times. It's always terrible. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym, she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it was unnecessary to bring 2, as it's not like I was going to explosively crap myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare. We laughed it off, but she brought 2 anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home, a bird craps all down me, ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful that she had brought an additional spare, so now I do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. How did life totally change when you came out of a coma? I was in a coma for 2.5 months in 2015 when I was 27, following a serious car accident. When I woke up, I still had a tracheotomy and couldn't speak. I don't remember a darn thing from the time I was in a coma, but what blew my mind is when I woke up, my new boyfriend at the time was standing there with my parents and they were chatting to each other like they knew each other. I'm a very private person and had made every effort for them not to know of him, so I found this disturbing. I also had no recollection of the accident for months, and for a week or 2 after waking up, I had to be retold where I was and what had happened every time I dozed off and woke up. I had no idea where I was and thought I was 23, not 27, for months. I also had a really hard time recognizing faces. Like I'd see people who I knew, but I couldn't remember why or their names or anything. They'd just look familiar. One time, about a month after I'd woken up, my parents took me in the hospital bed for a walk in the courtyard of the hospital. We passed a large mirror in the lobby and I freaked out. I saw my reflection and I knew it was me because I recognized my parents pushing me, but I didn't recognize my own face. There were no injuries to my face or anything, I just didn't recognize myself. I was horrified because I had imagined myself much better looking because I had some pictures of me and my friends in my hospital room. In hindsight, it was probably just that I looked sickly and had no makeup and my hair was crazy. I also had the brain injury stare, which is hard to explain but basically a blank look in the eyes. I'd lost about 50 pounds while in the coma, not a diet I would recommend, because I had extensive bowel and stomach injuries, but oddly my face looked really puffy and fat. I also felt that I looked way younger than I was, and I found my forehead and cheeks were larger than I remembered. It also blew my mind that I'd gone into the coma in late winter, and there was quite a bit of snow on the ground, and when I woke up, it was spring and there was no snow. I had a large window in my hospital room. The news that shocked me the most was the fact that my parents had gone in and packed up my entire apartment. Like I mentioned, I was super private, and the idea that they went in there and boxed up all of my stuff and gave up my lease was hard to grasp. Obviously, it made sense, but I was still troubled by it. When I was a kid, I was messing around in our house that was under construction. I fell through the open floor to the floor below. My brother saw me land on my head and called 911. I woke up the next day watching TV and eating Teddy Grahams in the hospital. Then I don't remember anything until a few days later when I was at home. My parents said I was never unconscious because I was complaining the entire time and I was able to eat and use the restroom on my own. But I don't remember a thing. I'm now colorblind, where I have a hard time seeing green. It comes across as blue, gray, or brown most of the time. Yellow and purple are also hard for me. I didn't actually realize I was colorblind for a few years. I found out that the type that I have can be caused by head injuries. Cripes, I can't believe there are kinds of color that can be screwed up for you if you bonk your head hard enough. The CPUs inside our skulls really just are so intensely complicated. So, I don't know if this counts, because it was only 3 weeks, but I was so shaken when someone put on the TV and it was a newsreel about a festival in a town over. I wasn't even going to go. I just felt so weird because this was still like 3 weeks away in my head, you know? This can't be on TV. Did I just miss 3 whole weeks? Like, holy crap, what the hell happened? I was in a coma? Oh yeah, something bad happened to me. What was it that happened? Explosion? I'm not going to go into the details of the accident, but it was an explosion on the work floor that threw a piece of metal straight towards me. Tried to catch it in my arms and then my face. Didn't catch it. The wall did though, and it had a huge hole in it. Still don't know how I didn't die that day. It destroyed my upper and lower jaw, my arm, pinky, and burned most of my limbs. Mostly second-degree burns, so that wasn't really a problem. The problem was the jaws and the arms. My jaws were completely shattered into more than 100 pieces. The doctor told me he had to put pieces of bone in random places because he couldn't find the right spot they came from. I lost most of my teeth, about 3/4 of them. My lower lip was ripped off and was just hanging by one blood vessel and a few nerves. After 10 years, I still don't have all the feeling back, but that's the new normal, so I don't really notice anymore. And the arm was broken on the lower half, both bones snapped like little trees, and one of the bones sticking out of a gaping wound. Fun times. My wife was in a medically induced coma, which is really just heavy sedatives and paralytics for 13 days. She had complications from a bilateral lung transplant. The hardest part for her was that she had very realistic dreams during where she went home and came back to the hospital. So the first few times they woke her up, reducing the medications to check for neurological function, she was fairly panicked. So I got into the habit of telling her the daytime and location each time they woke her, letting her know that she was safe. It was extra hard on her as she was on a ventilator and restrained, so she couldn't communicate what she wanted to know. Interestingly, we were often able to tell what part of the dream responded to different events of her stay in the ICU. That was in February. She still has to sometimes ask if things she remembers really happened or if they were part of the dreams. Good news, she's home now, nearly fully recovered with just some mild kidney problems that are getting better and some neuropathy in her left leg. She's able to walk with a walker and do a lot of things on her own again. So I'm not a coma patient, but when my husband came out of a long period of unconsciousness in the hospice, he thought that the footstool was a dog and kept patting it. We all played along and called it a good boy for the rest of the time there. Oh my god, when my sister ended up in the hospital with an accidental poisoning, it freaked the staff out that she kept thinking random things were animals. She wouldn't drink her water because it had fish in it, or she'd randomly start petting her pillow and calling it a cat. I didn't sweat it though. If her water had fish in it, I'd let them go in the sink and get her a new glass. I brought her a stuffed cat plush to pet. Luckily, she was only like that for 2 weeks and she doesn't remember any of it. Not me, but my niece was in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks after doing crystal and frying her heart. She says that she could remember hearing her mum and dad in the room during a couple of the points, and that her anesthesia was lightened at about 1 week in as an attempt to wake her up. She was aware of it but didn't become conscious. She said that it was like being underwater, so you can sort of hear what people are saying, but not fully understand. She was extremely surprised and confused when she finally came to, and couldn't believe that she was out for so long. The last thing she remembers was snorting what she thought was white snow and then her boyfriend calling 911. She's insanely lucky to be alive, but will live with the consequences of this for the rest of her life. She has permanent damage to her heart and will likely die if she does anything like that again. Does 3 weeks count as a long time? I was in a motorcycle accident and was out for 3 weeks. Woke up as the person I am today, not really as the person I was before, although I do have a few of his memories. I found out that my hippocampus was damaged, so that accounted for the memory loss. I woke up remembering a lot of school stuff and things I'd read before, but had a very hard time remembering or knowing people. Didn't totally recognize my dad, had no idea who my mum was. I was apparently dating a really pretty girl, but I have no idea who she was and no memory of her. We tried to make it work, but it was too weird and the old me was too different from the new me, and I felt no connection to her. I did become really good at philosophy and logic after I woke up and ended up going to college to study it. I've got a year left before I can lecture in it as well, so I guess that's a plus. It's still weird sometimes that people approach me and greet me. They know so much about me, but I have no idea who they are. I usually have to explain to them what happened, and things get a little weird sometimes, but I usually end up making or remaking a friend. I'll say that we've got a few comas that are in the ballpark of 3 weeks. Perhaps that's our standard factory reset setting, or the longest time that a hospital will put you on a induced coma. On a more serious note, we think of ourselves as so permanent and our souls as such a set thing, but my gosh, it feels like we can have major parts of ourselves rewritten by one bash to the head. Good for this guy and his newfound logical proficiencies. Good luck in your philosophy PhD, I guess. My grandpa's biggest shock waking from a coma was the news that he wasn't in Spain. He was hit by a car near his house in England, and a lot of the nurses in the ITU were Spanish, and he caught their accent and thought that sometimes they spoke to each other in Spanish. They weren't meant to, we don't care. He had excellent care anyway. And maybe when he started opening his eyes briefly, he saw their skin tone. He couldn't understand how he had got to Spain. When he was coming around, he was getting distressed. We kept telling him he was okay. He was in hospital and the tube was helping him breathe. We forgot to share the news of, "You have not left the country." He was also shocked to find his feet hadn't been amputated, his feet and ankles weren't injured, about the only bit of him which wasn't, but somehow, in the coma, he thought they were. When fully conscious, he was shocked at the football results. I was in a coma for about 3 or 4 days after an intentional OD on Ambien, regular antidepressants mixed with some alcohol. I was more or less just unconscious, but I remember the first time I woke up, it was exactly like those movies where you're flashing in and out, and there are disembodied voices everywhere and people working on you. It was very weird. I remember waking up a few times once I was out of critical condition, mainly to throw up from the Narcan. Apparently, I had a seizure, I had cyanosis, blood was coming out from my mouth and my nose, my blood sugar dropped below survivable, and then just shot up into diabetic coma zone after a glycerin shot. I was severely underweight, and I guess they didn't take that into account. I had a breathing tube for most of the time. When I woke up, all I knew was that my throat was very sore and my entire body felt like actual chewed-up garbage. Other than that, I had no clue what happened. I just remember taking everything and falling asleep, and that was that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I can tell you that it isn't like you see in the movies. Nothing happens when you're in a coma. Your brain just shuts off. You know when you're little and you stay the night at a friend's house? When you wake up, you can't remember where you're at and you get nervous for a second until you remember? That's exactly what it feels like to wake up from a coma, but it never really clicks. I woke up from a 2-month coma after a bad wreck where I broke my neck, hip, and couldn't walk, among other things. I could tell I was in the hospital, but I didn't know why or what happened. For some reason, I thought I was 60 and I'd been in a comatose for 30 years. In fact, I'd been in a coma for 2 months and was in my late 20s. The doctors were amazed. I'd survived a 2-month coma, which is very unlikely, so this may be the longest period of time you'll get a legit answer for. But of course, people always have stories that are like, "My cousin was in a 3-year coma and said..." However, it's insanely rare that people will wake up after even months. 2 weeks because of swine flu. During this time, Oprah announced she was ending the Oprah Winfrey Show. I was very upset to learn this after the fact. Mostly because the TV running in my room, and the medication they had to give me to keep me under, gave the most cinematic dreams I've ever experienced. Somehow, the news of Oprah retiring filtered into my brain as dreaming about saving the whales with her in a submerged Chicago. We had a champagne brunch. It was excellent. I was also a superhero who could fly and fought my enemies on the rims of volcanoes. And then I woke up, and not only could I not fly, but my buddy Oprah had betrayed me into retirement. I was crushed. I don't know if 6 months counts as a long time in this context, but that's how long I was in a coma. The most shocking thing, naturally, was being told the date. The last date I remembered was sometime in September. I was being told it was March of the following year. I was in denial of this for several months, to the point of refusing to believe it was my birthday in the spring, and insisting that it must be Halloween, the only feasible holiday I could think of for roughly around the time I'd been awake, based on my last date that I knew. So my family had to tell me the cake they brought me was to celebrate Halloween instead of my birthday, otherwise I would freak out on them. Complicating this was the fact that I lost my sight in this ordeal, so it all seemed like some weird, trippy dream for me that I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't tell you when it finally sank in that the date was really 6 months beyond what I'd remembered, but it was a trip all the same. Not a coma, but an anesthesia experience. I remember waking up totally rigid down there, and tried standing up and almost fell over. The girl tried to catch me and I said, "I got this," and then I stumbled into the hallway and passed out. I wasn't in a coma, but I had a serious concussion. I woke up with no memory of anything at all. When things finally started coming back to me, a dog ran up to me and I started petting it. I looked at my dad and asked when we got this dog, because I didn't even remember getting him. Long story short, it wasn't our dog. My dad tells this story to his friends and says, That's when I knew you were messed up. Maybe it's a me thing, but I would be very disappointed if I'd assumed the ownership of a cute doggo, and my family then informed me that it was not in fact our Poochie. My grief might even overtake that which I felt for my lost memories. I have epilepsy, and I've been in a brief coma due to dropping and knocking. I don't recall how long it was, or anything about it really, just what I'm told. I woke up really confused, and for some reason, the first thing I did was try to leave so I could, and I quote, "go home and smoke a J." The nurses explained what happened while stifling laughter. I tried to walk out even though I had all sorts of crap hooked up to me though. Didn't even notice that stuff. I pulled all-nighters when I was 15 or so, and I decided to see how long I could go while on spring break. I stayed up around 5 days, but the 5th day I crashed and I don't even know when, and I slept on the couch and woke up feeling kinda groggy, mostly hungry and thirsty. I wasn't surprised though, as all-nighters can do that to you, just one will. And according to my family, I slept for about 32 hours and got up to pee twice, and I don't remember. After the 24-hour mark, my mum almost took me to the hospital, but she knew what I did, so she left me be. You end up so confused about the time and the day of the week as well. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I ate, and then it hurt like I was starving. I drank a lot of Gatorade to rehydrate after that. Since I'm getting a lot of questions asking about hallucinations or you guys sharing your own stories, and oh my god, are some of those weird. By the end of my all-nighter bender, I was having conversations that didn't actually happen and all sorts of crap just out of sight and auditory, which was hell considering I also have tinnitus and the constant ringing along with all of it isn't fun. Around the 4th day I was getting it, and from there it got worse. It probably didn't help that my diet during this was canned beans and iced tea. I don't even want to think about how that probably hurt my insides like my liver. All the things I thought I heard or saw helped me understand a little bit of what my uncle goes through with his severe schizophrenia, like voices, shadow people, and stuff like that. I woke up on a carriage with some other guys and one of them said to me, "Hey, you're finally awake." Honestly, I don't think you'll find many, if any, real replies from the ones who've been under longer than a few weeks for this. The truth is, people who've been in a coma for a long time wake up brain damaged. The trope of waking up after years of being in a coma and being okay is just not something that happens in real life. Someone who's been in a coma for years will wake up a vegetable. I was flying a plane and crashed in 1944. I woke up in 2011 and joined the Avengers and fought aliens. So what shocked me was the aliens. I understood that reference. I woke up after a 3-day coma to my dad sitting at the edge of my bed. The first thing he said was, "Oh, thank God you're awake. I didn't know when you were going to come around." I used to be a cop, but I was shot on duty. The surgeons saved my life, but I slipped into a coma. When I woke up a few months later, my wife had dumped me on minimum care and took off to hook up with my old partner and had taken my son with her. I had to travel cross-country to even find them. When I did, there was an altercation between me and my old partner that ended when my son shot him. Thanks, Carl. Wasn't for a long time. I was overdosed on anesthesia after an ingrown toenail operation. I slept for over 24 hours. Was just gone. But as I first passed out on the way home from the operation, my parents decided to just carry me to my room and let me sleep. Came up and checked on me as I seemed fine, they just let me be. I got put under for the operation before lunch the first day. Fell asleep in the car ride home. I was gone that full day till the next day late at night. So maybe 30 to 36 hours or so. But yeah, waking up, not remembering anything and thinking you've just been gone for like a few minutes. But it's dark when you wake up. And as you get downstairs, they tell you you've been out for pretty much 2 days. Like, you felt fine, but everything just felt wrong as well. Your body and mind are just confused. It was weird, not something that I hope to experience again. Yeah, granted, it was not a coma, only a trip to Albania. It was quite similar. I was there for 6 months in 2013, and when I returned, I was told that there'd been 3 Australian Prime Ministers while I was gone. Half my family and a few friends legitimately thought I'd passed away due to a poorly worded Facebook post. Day after the hospital discharged me, I found my Instagram and Facebook flooded with people mourning or apologizing. I was in a coma for 2 months the year the Patriots went undefeated but lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, and that blew me away. It was also super emotional because watching football was something I did with my dad, and when we watched a game together, he broke down telling me how he thought we were never going to get to see another game together. In 2003, I was in a high-speed rollover and as a result spent a few days in a coma. When I woke, I was shocked to find myself in a hospital. I called my mum and asked her if she could bring me a cigarette. She told me that she couldn't, I'd totaled our van, and I asked if she could just walk over, we lived close to our local hospital, but she told me that I was in Denver, that they'd had to flight for life me there. It was very distressing to me, both my location and that I'd rolled our van. She told me that she'd be there as soon as my dad got back to the house. Even after talking to my folks and the doctors, it was very hard to process what had happened. To this day, I only have extremely faint memories of looking at the clocks on the dashboard and zero recollection of roughly a week's worth of time preceding it. Literally just a blank spot in my memory that's still very uncomfortable for me. Apparently, I'd actually woken up a day or two earlier than I can remember, had already seen my folks and answered questions from both the doctors and police officers. I can't remember any of that either. What is the most pathetic GoFundMe or Kickstarter that you've ever seen? There are two that are tied for me. Help! I committed a hit and run, was found, and also ticketed for driving without a license and insurance. I can't afford these tickets because I don't have a job and I'm only 16. The other one was, please help fund my lawyer to get my daughters back after I lost them due to neglect and my substance habit. Basically, both of these equate to, help! I messed up bad and committed a crime. Pay to help me. I know a couple who did a GoFundMe for their wedding, and then they eloped. It's the 1-year anniversary of their eloping, and they're posting about it on Facebook like they didn't up and run away with their friends' and family's money. Frickin' jerks. A guy I knew made a GoFundMe asking for $5,000 to move out to LA to attempt to become a famous artist. Kickstarter is one thing, at least those offer incentives in return. This guy was straight up just asking for money to fund his lifestyle because he has zero initiative to save money for himself and parties it all away. $40 was the extent of the donations. The page was quietly removed a few weeks later. A girl in my town did one because she wanted a vajazzle, and her mum wouldn't give her the money for one. That very briefly went viral before it was taken down. Please pay for my honeymoon. We never got a honeymoon because we couldn't afford it. Please pay for us to take a late honeymoon. Same couple, 2 fundraisers. See, my brother-in-law and his wife asked for monetary donations towards their honeymoon in lieu of wedding gifts. I find this acceptable, but it was also extended to only those invited to the wedding, so probably really not the same thing. Definitely that lady who spent literally all her money buying lottery tickets because she was confident she'd win, then started a GoFundMe to get back on her feet. It was thousands and thousands of bucks if I remember correctly. I think the fundraising site shut it down. See, these are pathetic, but at least we can laugh at these. The narrator was fairly sure that this video would be filled with people writing about the ones where people use GoFundMe to pay their medical bills, which to be clear, isn't pathetic for them to do, as crippling medical debt can happen to anyone in the States at any time. What's pathetic is the system that lets it happen. Oh my god, the following post comes to mind. I recently lost someone very dear to me, and before I did, they had said that when they would, they could get me a new Nintendo 3DS, or at least help me to get one if I ended up with some money of my own. So now I would like your guys' help since she can no longer do, so I have found one that I would love to get, but it's a little pricey, so in her memory, please help me get this so I can honor her and what she wanted to do, thank you. By the way, there were no full stops in any of that.
What the heck? It seems like they're more upset that their friend didn't get a chance to buy them the 3DS than they are that their friend actually died.
Friend of mine had a parent lose their job and consequently requested money for recreational purposes because she wanted to enjoy the college experience. Normally, I would have chipped in, but her dad was a long-time executive at a big insurance company and she drove a new BMW as a high schooler. Not to mention she was going to college on a scholarship. I think she still pulled like $200. This is more in the analog world, but it's in the same kind of vein. My wife's cousin had a baby shower. The whole family bought her a boatload of stuff, walkers, car seat, stroller, all the standard expensive baby stuff. Well, after her baby was done with all of it, she sold it. probably for green herb money. Then she got preggers with her second child at age 19. She decided to hold a second baby shower. She was annoyed the entire family didn't just buy her all the expensive crap they'd already bought her over again. My sister posting one asking for money because she couldn't pay her rent because she can't hold a job down. She doesn't like to take responsibility for her actions and just expects everyone else to take care of her.
Help me with my gaming PC build.
They started a GoFundMe so they could quit work and stay home to tweet about professional wrestling. We popped out a bunch of kids and now we need a van.
Another favorite of mine is, I totaled my car, help me buy a newer, more luxurious one. Hey, I'm pretty, help me buy a Mac 'cause I want one.
A girl from my town started one in hopes of quitting her job and becoming a stay-at-home mum. I just saw two in the last week and one has made money and one hasn't yet. The first is this very attractive girl, her looks probably matter to the story, who posted a GoFundMe to get an extra $100 to help with her vacation. Her story was that she was a full-time nurse who struggles with a health condition and needs a break. She has enough for the trip that she's been saving for months for, but the extra $100 will help her cover some extra things. I checked it yesterday and she has almost $1,000. Someone donated $300 to her. The other is some kid who definitely smokes a lot of green herb, who wants $1,000 to buy music equipment for his crappy rap career. It was only posted this morning, but when I clicked, he had $20 donated to himself. He donated his own money towards it. Some woman whose standard coffee maker had broken and wanted money to buy a top-of-the-line Keurig. A guy who has money for mods on his automatic FRS and flaunts wads of cash on his Facebook, asking for a handout when his car got vandalized. I knew a girl who started a GoFundMe for a down payment on a house. Her justification was that she throws huge parties and everyone would come and party there. This girl I went to high school with's boyfriend was killed in a car accident a year or so ago. She started a GoFundMe for herself to pay rent and other expenses for her and their baby, by which I mean dog. They weren't married and she wasn't expected to pay any of the funeral costs. She was just trying to get free money because something bad happened.
Give us several $1,000s for our wedding.
When confronted, the girl said that she was being humble enough to ask for help when she needed it. Too bad she couldn't be humble enough to just get married at the courthouse. Definitely Zana Joshi's YouCare fundraiser. If you somehow don't know who she is, she's the lady who overreacted to a guy saying that his name was Humongous. She tried to make money because she was, quote, harassed by Humongous and wants to stop the patriarchy. What she got instead was a crap ton of $1 donations telling her how much of a sensitive piece of crap she was. A girl I knew a few years ago decided to quit her job and travel the world for a year. Racked up something like $30,000 in credit card debt and then started a GoFundMe to support her new freeing lifestyle. Wrote a whole diatribe about how important it is she not work and continue to live and travel doing nothing. I think it made like $200. It was so cringy to read. So to be clear, I think there is a line to be drawn in the sand with the whole boomer diatribe of young people expect to be paid for nothing, when it's directed towards these sort of people who literally want something for nothing while they travel in luxury and tear up the atmosphere while being waited on hand and foot. It may have some value to the argument. Just stop directing it at people who take student loans or who've been laid off and need some unemployment benefits while they get back on their feet. Deal? A guy I went on one date with, the date happened around 2006, had the dumbest Kickstarter. Backstory, he's friends with a bunch of my friends. We were on a date with the sole reason being that we were both gay and our friends just knew we would like each other. I'm a non-detectable, straight-acting gay and he wasn't. Not to say he was over-the-top flamboyant, but you could tell. Not a bad thing, I've dated flamboyant dudes and they're fun. The date? During the first part of dinner, he wouldn't stop going on about how rich he was, how he owned a house, how much he liked me, and that he couldn't wait to get me home even though we'd never met before. He reached across the table and unbuttoned a button on my shirt. I wear them with the top 3 undone as is, and he told me he liked a hairy man. I'm hairy, by the way. And said he was ready for us to move in. Then he started asking me what positions I was into in the bedroom. Then he started loudly talking about his Johnson. It's rigid under the table. I hushed him only for him to show me it via photo on an old 2004 camera phone and asked what I would do with it. I gave him a "Is this really the place for this discussion?" And he rebutted it with, "No, really, what would you do with it?" Our waiter, another gentleman, could tell I wasn't feeling it with this guy, thank God, and brought 2 separate checks. The cherry on top of the evening was when it came time for him to pay. He was upset that he had to pay for himself. I thanked him for the evening and got ready to head out. Then I remembered. He fricking drove us. Outside, he tried to start his car, but it wouldn't, so he threw rocks at it. I had to call my sister so she could jump his car. She came and asked if we needed a ride. He gave her a, "Nah, we got it from here," so she left, even though I was giving her the, "Don't you dare leave." From there, he was asking if I wanted to go home or if I'd rather come back to his place. I said, "Home please, I'm kind of tired." He took the long way, then pulled off the side of the road and confronted me about how weird I was at dinner. I told him it was strange how he went from being a pretty nice guy to basically making me feel more uncomfortable than I've ever felt in my life in a restaurant full of people. I was looking out my window while talking to him, and I had no idea how I didn't hear this, but he had unzipped his fly. When I turned back to him, the fricking Washington Monument was just standing straight up.
"What about just 1 or 2 licks and we can keep driving?"
I was fricking done. I told him off. He drove me the rest of the way home, with it still out, by the way, one hand on it and the other on the steering wheel, making a pouty face when I would look over. We got to my street, I asked him to delete my number. In short, worst date ever, one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life, and all by a guy claiming to come from money and talking about his posh lifestyle and huge apartment. Also, he pulled it out and got pouty because I wasn't overcome with lust at the sight of it. But anyway, here's his Kickstarter. About 3 years ago, my sister linked me to a Kickstarter.
"Isn't this that guy you hated after meeting one time?"
His Kickstarter was basically,
"Help me pay my rent, pay off my car, I'm saving to get married to my girlfriend of 10 years,
or some crap like that. The best part was also that he stated he had cancer on his twig and berries and he couldn't afford treatment. What happened to the house you owned at 25? What happened to the car that you owned? Which was still on his Facebook photos, by the way. You have a girlfriend? Johnson cancer? What? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There was a day-old account over on the Tuber Reddit that asked everyone on the sub to review his post on Kickstarter. Always happy to help another tuba player, I checked it out. Maybe he was starting some kind of organization for tubists. Maybe he was helping kids, who knew? It was literally a guy who played in high school asking people to buy him a tuba, a new $9,000 tuba at that. The members of the sub were not very impressed, and the original poster quickly deleted the thread and the Kickstarter afterwards.
"I want something I can't afford. Will you get it for me?"
There was a Kickstarter for an indie comic series I found through Reddit delusional artists called Full Stop, The Fall of All. It was like looking at a 14-year-old DeviantArt member trapped in a 30-year-old man's body who couldn't see how bizarre his setup was, how crude his drawings and writing were, and just how unmarketable his entire venture was. If you've spent nearly 2 decades trying to get the same darn story off the ground, then, like what an aviation engineer said to the inventor of the brick-based airship, this crap won't fly. So the setup was 2 gods make a bunch of powerful weapons and leave them lying around for some reason. They then build a creature to guard them, but give him a black hole for a heart for some reason again. This is bad and will destroy the universe for some reason. They send him down to live as a bald eagle. This is a furry comic, by the way. But his black hole will drive him insane and he only has a year to live. Suddenly, mysterious good guys want to kill him to save the universe, and really stupid bad guys want to kill him so they can destroy the universe. He somehow has a magic katana that has a samurai ghost inside, and the ghost speaks Shakespearean English. There's now another Kickstarter for this crap. They want to make a video game. They're promising it will lift features from Undertale. Somehow, this got funded. Well, regardless of how harsh this author's words about the creator's talent is, pretty harsh in the narrator's book, the narrator decided to check up both on the novel and the game. The novel never achieved funding, which the artist is hardly to blame for, but the game was under development for 3 years, released a demo of sorts, and then after one final update saying the pandemic was going to slow down production, they disappeared completely. Which honestly is fairly typical for a Kickstarter project. Oh well. When I was a film major, one of my film professors started a Kickstarter campaign for a zombie film app called Zombie Map. I'm pretty sure most of the contributions were from film students who feel committed to support him because it was a crappy idea for a lot of money. The idea of the app is that filmmakers can make film or zombie movies or short films and upload it on the app. The app acts like a GPS. If you click on an area with an outbreak, then you get to see movies that are set in that area. It never achieved its goal, but honestly, it was pretty close. This couple made one to have people pay them to meet. It was a long-distance relationship. Even worse was that they were known for breaking up frequently and had already made 2 GoFundMe posts about the same thing. I think the worst of all was that they actually made a decent amount of money each time. Me and my girlfriend are moving to Chicago. Everyone give us money for rent. No. An in-law of mine is dying of COPD. She never stopped smoking, even though her initial diagnosis was 10 years ago. So far, $1,300 has been donated so her husband can quit work to take care of her. A job her daughter is already doing. Thinking about the whole situation just upsets me. I have a friend who's kinda cute, but she's got nothing going on chest-wise. She started a GoFundMe for a chest job, and people donate because she's cute. Oh, I don't think it's up anymore, but my best friend went to jail and met this trick named Tricky Nikki. Tricky Nikki is a serious pillhead, and after she got out of jail, Tricky Nikki got into a huge fight outside of a club over a guy or something. Tricky Nikki set up a GoFundMe with a sub-story of "Boo-hoo, I was mugged on my way to Bible study," cause she is on paper still, so that was her official story. Well, she made $50, then someone ratted on her all over Facebook, and then the Snapchat video was leaked. They sent to her local police department, and now Tricky Nikki is in prison for 3 more years. Facebook drama is truly the best thing to watch from a distance. I volunteered as a teacher in Fiji. Another chick who was going in the same group as I was started a GoFundMe for herself, asking people to pay for her expenses. It was bad enough that she volunteered, yet wanted others to pay for her to do it, and then she shared it in the volunteer group with us, saying, "Please help out," smiley face. The Potato Salad Kickstarter, which raised $55,000 whilst promising people a bite. I was thinking of this one. Total props to the guy because he took his internet fame and did fun stuff afterwards. Semi-famous or even famous musicians setting up GoFundMe pages to fund the production of a new album.
Pay for me to make this album. If it flops, I won't be out any money, and if it gets popular, I'll rake in the cash.
I can kind of understand this with lower to mid-level artists, sort of buy the album before it's made kind of thing. One of my favorite bands has done this a couple of times, and they'll never get big record or company money or have hits, so having the fans directly support them is kind of cool. Usually, a higher contribution might get you the album and a t-shirt or signed merch, so that's a nice option. Some bands will never sell enough to rake in the cash, but still want to produce music. Someone like Beyoncé or Taylor Swift has no business doing this, though. This one guy wanted to take his girlfriend to EDC for their 1-year anniversary. He was asking around $700 for tickets alone. People roasted him and told him to get a job. He hadn't even considered hotel, airfare, or food, among other things. Shenmue 3. While the project itself probably isn't the kind of thing you think of when someone says pathetic, and it's certainly not, but the fact that this is a Kickstarter backed and publicized by Sony. Frickin' Sony put center stage during their E3 presentation with their own exclusive time slot. What the frick? I'm sure Sony were very unsure about the project when they decided to do that. The idea of Sony, one of the largest publishers in the world, if not the largest, asking fans to fund development of a critically acclaimed classic series, it's just obscene. And the most pathetic part is that it was fully backed almost instantly. Really, I'm just waiting for Activision to kickstart a Call of Duty title. That's the only thing left that could really outdo this. I had the greatest idea for a Kickstarter, then I realized it would have fit this category that we're talking about in the video. 1. Project is to develop a time machine. 2. Hire someone to go back in time, they must bring their own weapons. 3. They go back in time to just before Jesus' birth. 4. They record and document what the frick actually happened with him. 5. They hide the tapes in a secret location and never reveal their identities or any of what they've done so as to not upset the timeline. 6. In 2020, we go to the location and recover the tapes. 7. Everyone who contributed gets a copy of the tape. The problem is finding some kind of digital media which would keep the recording that long, which I don't think exists. Yes, sure. The The final problem is the only problem with this entire Kickstarter idea. The rest is completely reasonable and doable. I kind of wish that I had seen something like this in the days when I actually donated to Kickstarters. It's pretty great. Any Kickstarter asking for people to pay for their backpacking trip to Thailand or something to help them discover themselves. Someone from my high school started one to pay for college tuition. In the end, she had to suck it up and go into debt like the rest of us. Some guy I didn't know very well set up a Kickstarter in my name to buy me a new car because mine broke down every few weeks. I appreciated it, but it also made me kinda want to die. Some completely random guy posted about wanting to quit his job and become a full-time YouTube Let's Player. He wanted $5,000 to get started. He got a whopping $5, and you gotta think it was a friend who felt bad for him, or even just the guy donating to himself from another account. My old high school boyfriend started a GoFundMe for his second divorce. I can't find the link, but I remember seeing a GoFundMe on my Twitter timeline about this white girl who raised a lot of money because her parents didn't approve of her dating a black dude and going to prom together. Not really pathetic, but they raised a crap ton just for prom tickets. My cousin started a GoFundMe to buy dresses for a pageant. She then complained on Facebook the day after creating it that her friends and family liked her post with the GoFundMe link, but didn't donate. Meanwhile, she's 24, hasn't held down a job for longer than 3 months, and has dropped out of 3 colleges. Recently helped her with her resume, but she told me she couldn't apply to jobs because she couldn't afford a laptop. Girl I know who updated her Facebook all the time, complaining about welfare and how she works hard for her money and supports her kids, unlike all the people mooching off the system. She started a Kickstarter to get a new apartment because there wasn't enough space for her kids and they'd run into some issues that were keeping them stuck in a cycle of not having enough money. First 5 or so comments were all saying variations of, "Gee, if only there was some kind of system to help people out of these situations so people's lives don't get ruined by cycles of poverty." It came across as so stupid because she was so vocal for years, just because she had never run into hard times as a stay-at-home mum. What happened to people who got caught getting busy? At work. Worked at Wendy's when I was a teenager. Just me at the register, the manager, and another girl in her early 20s at the drive-thru. There was another guy in his 20s who was on the grill and an older woman at the sandwich station, who I chatted with often. It was almost closing time. The manager is in the office doing whatever it is they do. The woman at sandwiches starts doing dishes, and the other 2 are outside taking a quick smoke break. So I start cleaning up the dining area and take the trash out to the dumpster. The dumpsters are enclosed around a fenced gate to keep pests and animals out. As I approached the dumpster, I heard someone else whisper, "Shh, shh," followed by a quiet, "What?" I am now aware these 2 people are not actually smoking and probably doing something my 16-year-old eyes don't want to see, especially since it's my co-workers. So I stand there for a moment, figuring out what to do as I'm tired and ready to go home. Then, without a second thought, I heave the trash bag over the gate and yell out, "Throw the trash in the dumpster for me when you're done." I walk back inside to finish cleaning up. The 2 lovebirds walk in about 5 minutes later and do whatever they can to avoid eye contact with me. As I'm heading to my truck, I check the dumpsters to see if they threw the bag in the bin. To my surprise, they actually did. This was years ago. I was in the US Army working as a supply specialist, so I had keys to everything. Female coworker and I would do the deed everywhere. Storage rooms, offices, empty barracks rooms. It went on for months. One day, our platoon sergeant pulled us aside and told us he knew what's been going on. Said that he saw us in one of our large warehouse areas. He said as long as it never happened again, he wouldn't make a big deal out of it. He kept his word. Good dude. My friend caught the maintenance man and his wife doing the deed in the break room. He never said anything. At my old job in a sheet metal factory, we caught 2 elderly employees doing the deed in the back of his Suburban. We'd long suspected it, because they went from being extremely close to kind of just trying to not be seen talking too much. Also, because it was a job that had unlimited overtime, they'd both show up at the same time and leave at the same time, even though we didn't have set hours. It was wild because both his son and her sons worked for the same company. His wife would show up and bring food for the whole staff in our department too, and you could see the mistress's guilt whenever his wife was there because she'd always leave. After we caught them, we kept our mouths shut about it, but they both started being really nice to us. The woman would bring us all lunch every day. It honestly saved us so much money. We'd eat out almost every day prior to that. And I'm not just talking ham and cheese sandwiches that she bought. She was Mexican and would make us full meals, tacos with beans and rice, chilaquiles, nopales, you name it. She had this little griddle in the break room and she'd make them fresh. It's probably the only thing I miss about that job. Silver lining to a very awkward and complicated situation. You know what? I would have accepted those free meals as a bribe too. Knocking on a coworker's partner for their infidelity is already a thing I'm probably not going to do for the sake of keeping my own life uncomplicated, which I know is selfish. I may as well accept some delicious Mexican food to relieve my guilt. I found out my long-term girlfriend was banging a maintenance guy at the nuclear power plant she worked at, because he left a message saying he couldn't see her that night because a transformer had, quote, blowed up. I remember incredulously asking her, "You're cheating on me with a guy that says blowed up?" There was a girl who'd done the deed with some employees for pay. When caught, they transferred her to another building and took some minor disciplinary action against all involved. Then, she did it again at the new building, so they transferred her back. At this point, a couple of years had passed, so there were no old clients in her area. Then she did it again. Third time was the final straw to get her fired.
This woman was taking home 2 days' paycheck for 1 day worth of work. Wow.
I worked with a guy at my previous job who was a night security guard for the main facility. Very smart guy, but had tons of self-destructive behavior when he was doing well. He was caught on camera entering an office with a night janitor, and she confessed that they'd been doing the deed at work. When confronted, he admitted to doing the deed with her, and they said he'd be terminated. He agreed, but first asked them to show him where it explicitly said in the company policy that doing the deed on company grounds was prohibited. He'd already reviewed the company policy and knew he had a claim of potential wrongful termination, and they did as well. Soon after, we had an updated corporate policy release with some clarification on what was considered appropriate work behavior. The guy actually stayed with the company for years and went on to work in manufacturing, where he was terminated for more self-destructive behavior. People ask for more stories, so I'll share a few of the ones I recall and aren't too personal to him. Once, he went just beyond the city limits, it was a large city, to a decent-sized river and creek. He was shooting a sawed-off shotgun into the water when the cops came after numerous complaints. He had all the licenses required to duck hunt and could legally hunt there, but the officers had to talk him into moving to a safer location, because he wasn't hunting after all. The other story I recall was him driving a tiny front loader at work that a third-party contractor had bought in for the day. He ended up messing something up and then using the safety policy against the company as a way to protect himself. I can't recall the exact reasoning behind this one, but we all thought it was the end for him, but he managed to work himself out of it. Okay, what's today's topic? Reads question. I didn't know I couldn't do that. Back in 2010, my high school basketball coach got caught doing the deed with a very pregnant teacher in the hospitality room of the school. And I mean very pregnant. And both of them were married. Very sad. I work in a government office. Our boss got caught doing the deed with his private secretary. Boss stepped down and the secretary was suspended for 6 months. My boss was caught in affairs with 5 different women at the hotel I worked at. He was fired with a long investigation. It sure explained why the dude was always late leaving. He had to catch up from how much banging he did. I was caught by my boss's boss going at it with my boss. He threw his binder down on the ground to get our attention. Then he left and we broke apart, then just finished the shift. I was so sure we were both going to get fired. I was a nervous wreck the whole day. In the end, he decided not to tell anyone and not to fire us. He just asked me if it was consensual, which it was, and lectured me on how inappropriate that was. Obviously, I agree. He also said he wished us a happy relationship. Scariest and most awkward day at work of my life. Never again. I see the supervisor sometimes, and I know it's obviously something we'll both never forget.
You know, I have respect for someone who makes sure a lower employee, or anyone, isn't being taken advantage of. Good for him.
Got caught by my brother plowing a coworker in the back of our family-owned restaurant. He played it cool for a few years until we were talking about it at lunch and I casually mentioned how I know he caught us. That was the day I found out he was doing the same thing with the same girl. Update, to answer the number one question I'm getting, my god guys, it wasn't my sister, it was my brother's sister. I plant trees for a living and hire over 30 20-something-year-olds and send them into remote areas for days at a time. Often I set up trail cameras to track progress and get cool time-lapse shots, and also wildlife pics. On more than a few occasions, I've seen photos of staff walking off together, and one glorious shot of one of these people going south of the border on the other one. I delete the photos and I don't make a big deal of it. If it doesn't impact their tree numbers, I just consider them on a break. Most of the time they're paid per tree planted, so it's up to them how much time they want to plant versus how much time they want to do the deed.
In my case, nothing happened. They said sorry and closed the walk-in fridge door. Restaurants are a weird and wacky world.
Yes, pizza restaurant of more than 10 years here, can confirm. Lots of young, stressed out, overworked people who don't have time to develop social relationships outside of the kitchen they're chained to for 45 hours a week. Add in the fact that many restaurants have lax enforcement of literally every rule they're supposed to have, and that so many restaurants' employees are college kids or early 20s college dropouts that are still attractive and cool, and that so many restaurants serve alcohol to their staff at a discount frequently on the clock, and you've got a perfect storm. A perfect, sweaty, dramatic, foolish, horny storm. Also, substances. Very true of hospitality. Also, this was a decade ago, but I remember seeing that there was an additional factor in some article or another. If employees don't like their boss, then the number of workplace flings flies through the roof. I guess people console one another against a hated foe, and most people working in restaurants hate their bosses. So yeah, no wonder they're always getting busy behind the bins. I used to work at the county jail, and we hired a new officer that worked in the cage. The cage control room is semi-private and has control of unlocking doors, so no one can walk in without the cage operator pushing a button. She was in an open marriage and put it out for just about anyone. She got caught when 8 officers got the clap. A few spouses, who got the clap from their cheating husbands, complained to the sheriff and she was fired. Demotions, suspensions, and firings of other male officers followed after an internal investigation.
I mean, if you know she puts out for everyone, why in the name of sweet Satan's gonads would you not wear protection every darned time?
When 8 people or more get the clap, it's called a round of applause. Am I right? Not me, but my ex-boss snorted white snow in our bathroom before going south of the border on a customer in our parking lot. Came back in and boasted to us that she got free green herb from this guy. A week later, fired. She's still engaged to her fiancé, who is not the customer, by the way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work at a high-end restaurant for a few years, so I got a few stories. For instance, one time after closing up shop, we were getting ready to go home, when I heard a noise in one of the broom closets. I found 2 customers banging away in it after we'd closed down. Another time, I went into our walk-in freezer after we'd mostly closed to do a quick inventory, only to find one of the waitresses getting frickin' plowed by one of the other chefs. I laughed and said, "Don't let me interrupt, I'm just counting inventory." Another time, one of our corporate chefs got fired for thrashing his hog in the manager's office. So that was pretty neat. But the best one by far has to be the time we were closing up shop and this waitress and cook kinda had a little thing going on and the whole kitchen staff knew about it. So one day we saw them walk into our outdoor cooler and shut the door behind them. Someone mentioned it to me and naturally I told everyone who was still there. We all waited outside the door and listened to see if we could hear the sounds of them getting busy. And we did. So when they finished, they walked out only to be greeted by the entire closing staff shouting, "Frickin' finally!" Oh, they were so embarrassed. It was great. I never have, but I can tell you that entire company-wide design decisions have been made for Amazon fulfillment centers to help curb such actions. For example, all janitor closets are required to have half-glass doors. My math teacher got caught doing the deed with my English teacher on the school printer in the conference room. So he got the name Printer Effer. And yeah, he's German. The German word for printer is Drucker, so the name Drucker Effer sounds a lot better in my native language. Not me, but two co-workers at a small family restaurant. They got caught doing the deed in the bathroom when the owner literally opened the door on them because they didn't lock it. The girl was bent over the sink and they were watching themselves in the mirror. He slammed the door shut, and when they came out a few minutes later, panicky and shamefaced, he yelled at them, "If you're gonna do that, you clock out first," while the rest of us laughed our butts off. Worked retail in college. We were in the stockroom, clothes mostly still on, when the shift manager came in. I had her up against some fitted shirts. Me and her were written up and sent home. They interviewed us separately the next day, and we lied about not having a relationship so they wouldn't transfer one of us. Looking back, I'm actually pretty surprised we weren't fired. Co-worker and manager got caught. He got transferred and she started hitting on me, and everyone else. It was awkward, but they were both adults. Not necessarily on duty, but I was at work. I used to work on cruise ships, and crew occasionally got cabin inspections. My girlfriend/coworker and I were doing the deed in the morning when we heard a knock and the phrase, "cabin inspection," in an authoritative British accent, which we knew was the ship's captain. I managed to grab all of my clothes and run to the restroom. My girlfriend straightened out the room and managed to stall the captain and prevent him from checking the bathroom. She told me that I forgot the used rubbers on the floor and she managed to step on them to hide them with her bare feet. I owed her big time for that one. I used to work in fast food, and a manager got caught doing the deed with an employee. They were going to just transfer him, but they realized that the employee was 17 and the manager was 24, so he was fired. The employee quit because they thought it would keep the manager from being fired. I quit a few weeks later for unrelated reasons. I'm getting a lot of replies asking if we worked at the same place. It is scary how many places this seems to have happened at, and I work at Taco Bell. I worked at Whole Foods. A man and a wife working together, and the wife was 6 months pregnant. One day the wife goes out to their shared car during a lunch break, and lo and behold, inside the car, her husband is just banging away with another Whole Foods employee, someone much younger. I've never seen the entire store come together like a family as they did in that day to support the pregnant wife. The husband and wife did stay together against everyone's advice, and the young lady he cheated with quit work. The ones who I caught at work started dating immediately after they were caught, and now they're moving in together. The boss gave no Fs about it either. Huh. I was a whitewater raft guide 10 years ago. We would party at the area where we stacked our rafts at night at our boathouse, and we slept in tents nearby. One thing led to another, and my girlfriend at the time and I got on top of a stack of rafts under the stars quite drunk. The boathouse manager lived in a small apartment with an upstairs window directly adjacent to this stack of rafts. We would be introduced to our tours by him each day with a fun little anecdote like, "This is James, best river guide west of the Mississippi." So the next day after we did this, after saying nothing to us, he was introducing us to a new crowd and went, "Okay, now your guide is going to be Chelsea the Screamer," with a pointed look at us. She looked like she saw a ghost and then laughed it off. There were no further repercussions beyond the call-out and a bit of laughs. It was a laid-back environment, though. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm not sure you could ever get away with in a modern office environment, but it seems like par for the course for an outdoorsy job where the staff happen to get busy well away from the gaze of any HR-type folks. Worked at a bank branch a long time ago, and one of the financial advisors was pregnant with twins, and everyone was super happy for her. Apparently she'd been trying for several years with her husband, and it finally worked. Fast forward to her last day at work before her maternity leave, we decided to throw her a small goodbye party at the branch employees' room after closing hours. The husband was present as well. 15 minutes passed and suddenly the husband decided it was time for a toast and that apparently he made a lovely video for his wife to show her how grateful he was on a USB stick and insisted on showing us the video. So the manager bought him his laptop so we could watch it. The video was a hidden camera, I guess, in their bathroom of the advisor doing the deed with another guy with sound and everything. We were all so shocked, the video played for a good minute until the manager closed his laptop and basically sent everyone home. The advisor was crying her life out, the husband had this evil smile on his face and took his USB stick out of the laptop and said, "See you in court," and left. I was an engineer at a company. A couple were fired for doing the deed in his car in the parking lot. Our company was one of the biggest CCTV manufacturers in the world. I designed camera control systems. Our parking lot was also used to test products, and had one of the highest camera per square foot ratio of any parking lot anywhere. Our cameras had amazing zoom capabilities. This just never occurred to these two brainiacs. Management insisted that we delete all footage. And to clarify, these weren't engineers, they were support. Maybe they had an associate degree, but I doubt it. The parking lot is company property. Company handbooks and HR training both say not on company property. Also strongly implied is not with the company name. At a college job in an office, the janitor walked in on me and another intern furiously banging it out with zero remorse in an empty conference room. The only repercussion is that now I get to marry her in a month. Kinda weird that the janitor forced you to marry her. Sort of work, but more like university. We worked as lab assistants, teacher's assistants kind of roles, and after we finished grading assignments in the classroom section of the lab every Wednesday night, her and I would do the deed on one of the desks. There were 10 desks and 10 weeks left in the semester. So we thought we would take advantage of the privacy, and it would give us an excuse to grade quizzes and tests and work sets as fast as possible and do the deed on a different desk every week. The last week we were just screwing away on the last desk. The professor shows up with food thanking us for being so much more dedicated than all her other assistants in all her years teaching. She sees us, with the chick sitting on the desk with her legs spread wide and me facing her, thrusting, standing up. The professor says, "Well, this explains a lot. Don't get pregnant." She put the food down and left, locking the door on the way out. We finished, ate the food, and did the deed again. Best professor ever? Not even a question. My wife is a teacher. I visited her classroom after hours and we banged in the actual broom closet like something off a crappy sitcom. Of course, someone walked in and said, "Whoops," and left, and I almost lost my mind and my focus. But my wife was like, "Relax, half the staff are doing this, and I've caught a few in here myself before." It was difficult to finish. I got caught going at it in the toilets at a work party with my coworker. Luckily, whoever it was saved us the embarrassment and just knocked on the door loudly. We straightened up and left, carried on drinking. The toilet was tucked away in this corner so the party couldn't see us leaving and no one was outside when we left. Nothing ever came of it, thankfully. Very funny though, 10 out of 10 would do again. We hired a new guy and as he was relocating across country, he asked for a job for his wife and we accommodated that. They ran the customer-facing aspect of our shop, which included a storefront that was only open a few hours a week. Because there was a cash box in that room, it was very secure. The owner's son had a reputation of raiding it whenever he needed a smack fix, so new doors and new locks, two-way mirrors, among other things. Routinely, we would call into the room to get things from them, and the phone would go unanswered. They assured us they were up to nothing, but we heard noises a few times, so I played a hunch. I was IT, and one day coming out of the server room, I passed them in the hall, and she asked what I was doing in there. And I fabricated a security system that no one bothered checking. I explained that I was in charge of tapes and updates, and that due to robbery and theft we had a camera in every room, including their office. I hadn't looked at it in months and was restoring the system to look at some stuff from the past 2 weeks. Fast forward about 20 minutes and they were tearing the room apart looking for a camera. You can hear her sobbing through the door, shocked at what I have on tape. They got a warning, I pointed into a vent as a heads up for the camera, and warned it got the whole room. We eventually fired both of them. I worked in loss prevention. Catching other employees became a pretty normal event. Here's the thing, most retailers put twice as many cameras in employee areas as they do in customer areas. If it was between employees, they would get a verbal warning, sometimes a written, and managers and employees would cause one to get transferred, usually the manager. Employees and a non-employee in an employee-only area was either a written or a final warning given. I can't think of anything crazy except for when I first caught someone, the other loss prevention people were just meh, and after a while it became a normal thing. What is the most embarrassing thing you had to tell your parents? When I was 7 or 8, my grandma bought me this pair of jean shorts that were way too small, but she insisted I wear them anyway. Throughout the course of the day, the rubbing of the shorts caused a few cuts and something like rug burn all over my downstairs bits. When I went to pee, of course, it burned like crazy. I had to go to my mum and explain what had happened. It was awful. I once got a bunch of jelly beans for Valentine's Day from my ex-girlfriend. I hate jelly beans. Absolutely think they're the worst tasting things in the world. But I acted like I was grateful and took them home. 4 weeks later, it's 8 p.m. on a Friday and my car broke down. No one could really make it out of my house, so I was sitting in my room, bored. So I started tossing jelly beans up and trying to catch them in my ear. Well, after an hour, I got one to land in my ear, like really in my ear. I went to retrieve it and I pushed it in further. So for 30 minutes I tried getting it out, and it kept getting wedged deeper and deeper. So finally I walked upstairs, looked at my mum on the couch and said, "I have a jelly bean stuck in my ear." She blinked and stared for a minute, and then asked, "How old are you?" 16. "I'm going to use this key to try and get that jelly bean out of your ear. If that doesn't work, I'm using it to drive you to the pediatrician since you're a goddamn 4-year-old. She was able to get the jelly bean out after a while. I started a stamp collection when I was 13. I really liked stamps, but nobody mailed me anything and my parents never got any good ones. So I started checking my paper route customers' mailboxes and was able to start a really good collection that way. I hid my collection in the basement because I thought my parents were searching my room. One day, my dad found hundreds of letters addressed to different people in the neighborhood where I hid them behind the Christmas stuff, and he freaked and started yelling at my mum. He said he knew what she was up to and wanted a divorce. I was scared and embarrassed but didn't want my parents to split up, so I confessed to the collection. They made me walk my route and return all the letters while my dad videotaped me. They did split up that year anyway, so I shouldn't have said anything. My dad sent me the videotape for my 30th birthday present with a card that just said, "Good times." Oh my god, you absolute thicko. I think I was a lot younger than 13 before I was finally able to logic out why you shouldn't steal other people's mail. Still, I hope your father allowed you to keep the stamps on the mail you stole. I doubt the recipients were going to keep them anyway. He has a pretty good sense of humor, too. I have to tell mine that I'm having surgery. Circumcision, age 26, because I tore it while doing it in the butt with a woman twice my age. The first time I splooged when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I think I was just rubbing myself on the side of the bed or something, and suddenly I had no idea what was coming out of me. I hadn't learned about this, and just this white stuff dripping out of my gentleman made me freak the frick out. I had no idea if it was natural or something terribly wrong had just happened, and my mum was sleeping, so I woke her up to tell her that some weird white stuff just came out of my wee-wee. Obviously, she was a bit shocked and was trying to hide her laughter. I was a bit confused and she kind of briefly explained what I did and said it was fine and not to worry. I don't think I thought about it too much at the time, but when I was a little older, I realized how I woke my mum up to tell her how I splooged for the first time, and my embarrassment burned like a red-hot poker. When I was 17, I tried to wake my mum up after she'd worked until about 3 a.m. She didn't want to wake up, of course, and then I told her it was because I needed to go to the Planned Parenthood to get the morning after pill, about 17 years ago. And that got her up in a flash. Didn't even ask questions or complain to me. I guess she wasn't ready to be a grandma. I was younger and I didn't really know how to fix the problem, but my number 2 was too big to flush down the toilet, so I had to ask for help. "Oh, come on, just pick it up and break it in half like a man." I was 9 or so and I did number 2 and blood came out, but instead of my mother, my father came. He freaked out thinking that I was having my period too early and ran to call my mom. I had to tell mine that I didn't know what a virgin was. In middle school, I didn't really know a lot about doing the deed, but I sure as crap knew how to tickle my pickle. Anyway, some conversations started at lunch, and if I recall correctly, some kid made fun of a girl because she wasn't a virgin anymore. Somehow I got pulled into it and I said I wasn't either. More questions, with me backpedaling and finally admitting I didn't know what a virgin was. Cue my classmates making fun of me all day. In science class, I wrote a self-deletion note and folded it up. I put "Mom" on it and put it in my backpack. I got home, went off to karate and forgot about everything. Mom picks me up and she has the note on her dashboard. Busted. Long story short, we had the talk, and then I had to go with my stepdad to the library and get an educational booklet on doing the deed. The one thing I remember from one of the books was that there were comments every few pages from a cat. One page about girls' periods and tampons had the cat wearing a sombrero with tampons hanging off the hat. The other page shows the cat all proud and him saying he just caught a mouse. Then a look of fear and he says, "Help, I've swallowed a tampon." It was a very strange day. I was an early 20s male and I still had never been in a relationship, nor have I ever had any real discussion come up with my family about my romantic life, in part because I was too embarrassed by it. But that summer, a couple of my friends had recently come out as gay, and I mentioned it to my parents while I was visiting home. Later that night, my mum somehow started on a "we'll love you regardless" sermon. While in a way comforting, it was also embarrassing because there I was, a full-grown 23-year-old man, having his mother openly acknowledge his innocence and effectively tell me she thought I hadn't brought anyone home because I was gay. On top of that, my dad is perhaps a bit more uneasy with homosexuality. He wouldn't kick one of his kids out or disown them for being gay, but I imagine he'd struggle to hide some disappointment. He was there for this conversation and he was visibly tense during it. After he went to bed, I turned off the TV and had a 10-minute conversation with my mum in which I had to explain to her that I was not in fact gay, but simply socially inept. It took 10 minutes because she spent the entire time continuing her "we'd love you regardless" stance. I said, "Mum, I'm straight and you're kind of freaking Dad out." And my mum said, "But if you weren't straight, we'd still love you." That's great, but it's irrelevant because I'm straight.
But if it wasn't irrelevant, it'd still be okay.
2 years later, I was finally in a relationship with a girl. In short, I had to come out to my mother as being straight. Well, my mum found my personal toy collection, so there's that. I had to tell my septuagenarian grandparents that I may have given them crabs. My grandmother just decided to get new linens and toilet seats that day, and my grandfather just shrugged it off and said, "I guess I'd better shave it back like I did in Korea." When I got my period for the first time, I sent my mum an email.
"Mom, Dad, you're going to want to sit down for this. I'm adopted.
I'm bulimic and I can't stop and I need help." I'm sure that isn't what my mum wanted to hear her 24-year-old son tell her.
"Mom, why is there a schlong on my bathroom floor?"
Apparently, the cat dug a toy out of my parents' hiding place in their bathroom and left it for me to find in my bathroom. The worst part was my mum was saying, "Oh dear God, I hope it's not the two-headed one." So I don't really know who it was more awkward for. I had to admit to my parents that I'd been constipated for a long time. There's no appropriate time to bring that up without being abrupt. Pretty much had to walk into the kitchen and say, "I'm constipated," and let all of the questions ensue. "You're full of crap." I had to tell my mum that I had warts down there because I didn't know what the frick to do about them. I was 19 and just freaking out. Surprise number 1 was that I'd done the deed. Surprise number 2 was that I had not just those warts but also in the butt. So like 2 hours later, when I realized I'd told my mum I had warts in my butt, I was awkwardly like, Mom, it's not because he put it in there." Definitely a moment of oversharing, and I still cringe over this. Well, since so many of you in the comments apparently enjoy hearing about it when it happens, we've officially reached the story that makes the narrator gag. So well done, Warty McButtface. Ugh. Seriously though, not really your fault. I just can't stop thinking about how going number 2 through those must feel. And I've doubled over again. No. Thank you. As an 18-year-old, I had to get my mum's advice on lubricant. Doing the deed was extremely painful and I felt like there was too much traction down there. The conversation was heck of awkward, but she did give me some advice. Not me, but my older brother. Not sure how old he was, and I was just a wee kid. My brother had his first wet dream, and he woke up and noticed the splooge on his wang, and freaked out. Only my grandma was home, while my uncle also came home for a visit. My brother told them directly what happened, and my uncle decided to mess with him and told him he was going to die. My brother freaked out more and started yelling, "I'm gonna die!" I didn't really remember the details, being little at the time. All I remember was my brother seeing something in his pants and yelling that he was going to die. Nowadays, as adults, my grandma for some reason would keep bringing up that story in family get-togethers right in my brother's face. I also remember her telling this to his wife the first time. On average, I'd hear this story once or twice a year. Every time my sister introduces a new boyfriend home to us, she tells it. Every relative who comes to us, she tells it. Never knew or understand why my grandma would keep telling the story. It wasn't until I was a bit older that I understood the story and I cracked up every time she told it. My friend had to call his mum from the principal's office and tell her he wrote John Hart's The Eggplant on his own binder. He was trying to get someone else in trouble and then remembered he had a conscience. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had to tell mine that my brother and I could no longer sleep in our bunk beds after he met his hot girlfriend. He had the top bunk and would sneak her home at night after he thought I was asleep. Their motion made the bunk beds rock, and I couldn't stay asleep with the moaning and motion. When I was 16 and I got fired from my job at the supermarket because I stole 2 quarts of ice cream. Or when I was 5 and I stole the entire block of cheese out of the fridge intending to eat the whole thing. I felt sick after about a third and then I hid it behind the bed until it got so smelly I had to tell them to move the bed because it wasn't a mouse in the wall, just cheese. Both were highly embarrassing and upsetting at the time, and I'm realizing after writing this that I apparently have food theft issues. I had to come out to my 90-year-old grandmother, who I was living with, and told her that I was gay in front of her mahjong friends in order to explain my date, during which I lost my shoes and wallet in the woods, and that's why I needed $7 to buy a pair of Goodwill sneakers so I could go to work? I was 24! I was about 6 weeks from my due date when I started bleeding. What the frick? Long story short, everything was fine. I was a smidge dilated, but okay, as was my kiddo. So the OB asks me if, outside of OB appointments, I've inserted anything into my downstairs area or done the deed. I admitted I'd done the deed nearly a week prior, but I wasn't told not to as my pregnancy was progressing just fine. The OB says, okay, that's probably what it was, and advises me to err on the side of caution and refrain a bit. Okay, fine. She leaves to get my discharge papers. My mum is staring daggers into my skull, and I'm seriously like, is there something on my face, mum? And she started screaming about how my then-husband is a jerk, and how dare he make me do the deed, etc., etc., and I was like, Mum, he didn't make me do anything. And she's like, why would you want to? She's simultaneously annoyed, disgusted, mystified, and embarrassed by her pregnant adult daughter having pregnant adult fun 32 weeks gone. Fast forward 4.5 years, my brother's girlfriend is 4 days past her due date, and wouldn't you know it, the first piece of advice to pop out of my mum's mouth was, go do the deed, that'll get her out of there. And I'm like, whoa there, it's okay for her to do it, but I'm an embarrassment? And her response, yes, but this is necessary. You wanted it. Every now and again, she's got her backwards thinking moments. I was back on spring vacation from college. At the time, my girlfriend and I had just split up. I had a one-night stand with a girl I met online. Here's where it gets bad. We were a little drunk and my parents weren't home when I got back. We made our way to the guest room, shedding clothes the whole way. We did the deed and passed out. Apparently my mum collected the trail of clothes and left them outside the door. She also walked past my parents on the way out in the morning. I hadn't woken up yet. Here's where it gets worse. I stupidly had gone bareback. A week or so later, I started to get some concerning symptoms. I had to basically tell my dad that I barebacked some random chick and now I had to go to the doctor because I probably have mega super transmissible diseases. I had a UTI. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to try and repurge that memory from my brain. My mother found a wrapper for a Jimmy in my room. I was trying it on to make sure that I knew what I was doing. I didn't enjoy explaining that to my mother.
You know, coming out as trans was pretty bad. It was super cringeworthy, and for the next week, my mom kept making awkward comments about girly stuff, as if to say, wink wink, nudge nudge, you're a girl now.
Honestly, my parents both did the exact same thing when I came out to them. But nothing was funnier than when my dad and I were watching the news together, and he was going on about how hot the weatherwoman was, when he just stopped and said, Oh yeah, I'm so sorry, I forgot, you're a girl. I told him, yeah, and I've had girlfriends for over a year now. He just stayed silent for a few seconds before mumbling, so you're a lesbian? Telling mine that I had depression and thoughts of self-deletion. I was almost not able to tell them because I didn't want them to worry about me. That I kinda sorta set a gas station on fire. It was really only a couple of gas pumps out by some abandoned garages, and it honestly was an accident, but it was quite embarrassing. Actually, the most embarrassing part was that the guy on the motorcycle who'd seen the fire from the road and came over to put it out escorted me home and made me tell my parents. That was embarrassing, especially since my father was the biker's guidance counselor. Awkward. Well, at least your father had a pretty good indication that he was doing his job right and setting this man on the right tracks to solve problems when he saw them. Good on your dad and the random biker for being such diligent and community-minded souls. I had to explain to mine that the reason I was coming home for the weekend was because my husband had shoved me during an argument. We were together for 10 years before getting married. Mum and Dad both put a lot of money into the wedding. Not a ton of money by normal standards, but a lot of money by our family's standards. I moved home a month later and I'm currently getting divorced. But I'll never forget the dread I felt telling my mum why I was leaving him. I thought I was smarter than that. Yes, we're doing the deed. No, we're not a couple. Telling mine the first time I got a bladder infection, because everyone knows darn well that likely means inexperienced deed doing. Went out rollerblading the one time. I had to come home and tell my parents I was gay. When I asked mine, "What's your first name?" Coming out to my parents as a drag queen. It didn't go too badly. My dad accepted it better than when I told him I was bi, but the subsequent question and answer session was awkward as heck. I was messing around with inserting things while flicking the bean. When I was about 12, all of a sudden I feel a ripping sensation and blood comes pouring out. I freaked out and had to tell my mum that I was doing it with a magic marker. She just laughed at me. She likes to bring that one up at random family dinners 10 years later. Fun times. The neck massager she found in my room was actually a massager for a different thing. Just kidding, I never told her. Screw that. Huh? When I told mine I was dating an Indian girl. This hasn't happened yet, but I'd surely be screwed if my mum sees the things that I linked on Reddit. This happened to me when I was in 8th standard. I was painfully awkward near girls, hence I never had the guts to talk to my crush about my feelings. My crush was extremely smart, rated over smart by my mum, active and vivacious. Of course, she was cute. My mum was aware of my infatuation with her because she had once discovered a Valentine's Day card in my bag, which I'd planned to give her but couldn't. My mum wasn't very happy with that since, according to her, I should focus myself on making myself a better person rather than engaging in meaningless pursuits, and she actually blamed my crush for that. Probably she was just jealous because my crush was much more accomplished than I was. So one day, my crush calls me and I pick up the landline. My heart was already in my mouth. I tried to act cool and was talking to her. Somehow, my mum, call it her sixth sense or my apparent excitement over the phone, comes to know who I'm talking to. My crush says, "So, have you done the assignment yet? Actually, I've lost my notebook and I was wondering if you had seen it." "No, I haven't completed the assignment. Sorry to hear that. Where did you—" Then suddenly, "Why are you talking to that girl? I told you to stay away from her. Put the phone down now," came my mum's shrill voice behind me. I was so freaked out and embarrassed that I put the phone down that instant. I didn't have the guts to call her back. I had a big fight with my mum and sulked all day. The next day, I got to go to my crush and apologize to her about the matter. She handled it very well. The day after that, my mum invited her over to our house to make up for it. She felt guilty about it too. But things were never the same between me and my crush again, and we barely talked. Needless to say, she never called me again. I was 5 or 6 years old, playing in my room, trying to squeeze into small spaces to make my secret hiding place. I did not know how boy and girl bits worked. As I was crawling under the bed, halfway under, my little Johnson snuck into itself. I ran out of there as fast as I could and I started frantically telling both my parents, who were watching the news in the living room, that my wee-wee had disappeared. They started laughing, and even to this day, 22 years later, the story does not cease to be told at family parties. I crashed my Cherokee into a concrete barrier. Okay, well, maybe not crashed, but more like firmly bumped. I was driving home late one night in winter. It had done that weird thing where it rained just enough to put a sheen on the road, and they hadn't even thrown out the salt just yet. So long story short, I took an S-bend a little too tight, spun out, and hit the concrete barrier head-on. Hard enough to send everything in the back seat onto my lap and lurch the passenger seat into the glove box. Also hard enough to cause enough cosmetic damage to pinch the hood shut and dent the passenger side quarter panel. Hardly noticeable if you didn't look too hard. The old dog stalled because I let the clutch out, but started back up and got me back home. I wasn't going to tell my parents until the whiplash set in 2 days later and I couldn't turn my head. I went to them crying that my head was stuck because I crashed my old Jeep. I was expecting a talking to and I got laughed at instead.
Seriously? The car looks fine. Are you okay though?
We pulled out the dings with a hand winch, a sledgehammer, and a crowbar. Everything in the engine bay was perfectly fine thanks to a huge bull bar that I had in the front. I went to the chiropractor and life continued. Sadly, I had to sell that old dinosaur a couple of months ago for something newer. Probably not the safest car in terms of no airbags and it was built in '89, but still the best car I'd ever had. I was 18 and it was Christmas night. I started getting really sick. Some kind of stomach virus and I thought I was dying. Ended up crapping in the bed. It was very awkward when I woke up at 6 a.m. in wet boxers and waddled into my parents' room to tell them. I've had to tell mine that I've been going through the divorce from hell for the last 2 years. I thought it was embarrassing when I had to tell my dad about it 2 years ago, but I've more or less run through my savings, so tomorrow I need to call him and ask if I can borrow money to pay my attorney fees and alimony. What was the stupidest reply to a serious question that you've ever heard? I was a nanny when I was in college for this very bizarre family who always pretended like I wasn't there. I was walking down the street with the mother and her 2 kids. It was February and the sun glare was really bad, so naturally I was wearing sunglasses. One of the kids, about 4, asked his mother why I was wearing sunglasses in winter, and the mother responds,
"Well, some people are not that smart and they just want to look cool."
Please note, both parents were professors at an Ivy League college. My friend was a second-year medical student and she was walking through the main floor of our hospital in scrubs. She was stopped by a passerby asking for directions and she was asked, "Hey, where's PET-CT?" She said, I think there's one in the nearby mall." The man looked at her confused and was like,
"The PET-CT is in the mall?"
And she replies, "Yeah, like the 2nd floor, I think. It's not called Pet City though, it's called Pet World, I think."
Do you think I'm looking for the pet store?"
2 years of medical education and common sense returned to her in that moment and said, "Oh my god, you mean the scan? No, it's down that hall on the right. I'm so sorry." He shook his head, walking away, and we heard him say, "I wish I was looking for a frickin' pet store." Was in college and went to the calculus study hall to see if I could learn something. One of the problems was something like, a man throws a ball on the moon at a speed of X miles per hour at an angle of Y degrees. How long before the ball comes down? The response from the teacher's assistant, who was a PhD candidate in math, "That's a stupid question. Everyone knows there's no gravity on the moon." I never went back. I'm an astronomer. Before we were married, my soon-to-be wife asked me,
"How can there be dust on the moon when there's no gravity?"
I asked her in genuine curiosity what made her think there was no gravity on the moon. She closed her eyes and went,
"Oh, duh."
She keeps bringing it up years afterwards despite my continued reassurance that there are no dumb questions. But she doesn't believe me. I love that woman. I actually kind of love that last one because even if it shows some basic ignorance or a preconceived notion, it does display enough knowledge or logical capacity to be able to work through and correct yourself. Now, if only more people could admit they were wrong and react to criticism that way instead of knee-jerk reactions. Me, when I was writing a construction bid, is the standard flooring on these units going to be tile or vinyl? The client said, yellow. My high school had a geography bee where one kid was asked what the capital of France was, and he replied, Spain. In my high school physics class, the teacher asked what was the unit for time. This girl screamed, kilograms. After that, you could see the teacher lost hope on all of us. Back in India, my company had hired a motivational speaker to give a speech at an event. There were 300-odd people, with senior people of HR also in the audience. Everyone was bored, but the lady instructor kept on going on how to build self-confidence. Sensing that people weren't interested, she started getting the audience involved. I, being a backbencher as always, did not care about it at all. I thought she'd stay in the front. I was feeling sleepy and not paying attention to it. After some time, I saw her coming to the back. She suddenly stopped next to me and asked, "Are you motivated?" I wasn't sure what was going on, and I answered, "No, I'm Dave." Half the crowd started laughing. She was taken aback by my answer and didn't know how to respond to this. She didn't come to the back to ask questions after that. When accused of nepotism after giving his son an important role as a politician, Brazil's president said, "He has to be someone's son, why can't it be mine?" Truly an argument you can't fight back. It was actually me who said the dumb reply. This was when I was younger, by the way. And yeah, I realize that everything is when I was younger. Specifically, this happened about 2 years ago. And yes, I'm still a socially awkward idiot, I was just more of one back then. I was texted by a friend saying, "Can I take a rain check?" A few minutes later, I texted back, "Nope, no rain." I had literally checked the weather for the day. I was a socially awkward idiot, so yeah. In physics, there's something called the right-hand rule, which helps you find the direction of force given the direction of the magnetic and electric fields. It's a little hard to explain how exactly, but you literally use your right hand as a model. My professor asked me in front of the class what the first thing you needed to identify in order to use the rule was. I panicked and answered, "Your right hand?" In law school, we had a free clinic for qualifying and lower-income people to come in. We couldn't technically advise them because we weren't barred yet, but we could guide and try to help them through some complex issues they might not have a handle on. One guy came in and wasn't even my case, but being done by a classmate next to me during a session. The man, dead-faced and scared, said, "Would filing for bankruptcy ruin my life?" The girl, flustered on how to answer, said, Well, it looks like your life is already pretty bad." We were discussing about Antarctica, and some guy casually said, stone cold face, "You don't actually believe Antarctica is a real place, right?" Full disclosure, I was the idiot in this conversation, but in my early 20s. I was at a friend's small gathering and I was chatting with my friend and some guy I'd never met before. Asked where he grew up, he said, "DC," to which I replied, "Oh, I didn't realize people actually lived there." I knew it was stupid as soon as it was coming out of my mouth, but I also kind of thought it was a district, like the financial district, and people went there for work, but lived just outside of it. Worst part was that even though I was fresh out of college, I was working in a local political office, and these were folks from state legislative offices, so I should have known better. They laughed at me for a while. At work, a customer asked one of our chefs where the fish comes from. He pointed to the kitchen and said, "It just kinda comes through that door." This guy is the kind of guy who wouldn't think to make a joke like that. He has an absolute heart of gold, but unfortunately, he is actually that thick. I once got asked by him if a pot of obviously boiling water was hot and had to stop him from just dipping his hand in there when my sarcastic answer was to dip his finger in and check. That is fricking adorable, if a little sad. Just a big old dopey sheepdog of a man. And this guy who's apparently ready to jam his hand into scalding liquid is a chef? Does he still have all of his fingers? Because if he does, that's a frickin' miracle. I got a former friend a job at my workplace. She was seriously stressing, talking about how if she doesn't find a job, her ex might win the custody case and take the kids, and she wasn't finding anything. So I talked to my boss and got her a position doing what I do. 1 week later, she was supposed to go on her first call. She overslept by 4 hours and ended up missing the job. I called her as I was leaving to do the job she missed, and I asked, "So, are you going to talk to our boss and see if he'll give you another chance?" And she straight up went, "Oh, I don't think so." "Oh well, wasn't meant to be." Girl, what? As a side note, I work in the funeral business. The job was taking a body down to get an autopsy. The place where this particular person was getting one was over 2 hours away. We're supposed to be there at a certain time, otherwise we spend all day there. This girl and I are no longer friends. Stupidly of me, the job wasn't what led me to sever ties. Along with not working, this girl had constant car troubles. At the time of the job, she had a working vehicle. I let her use my car because I'd bought a new one and planned to sell the old one. We worked out a deal where she'd babysit my 4-year-old in exchange for using my car to get her kids back and forth to school. A month into that, she couldn't babysit for me anymore and wasn't paying me to use my car. I repeatedly asked for my car back over the span of 3 months, and she'd give me some kind of excuse every time. I ended up having to go over to her apartment, demand my keys, and then go back to get my car later. Last I heard, she still has her kids, and was recently let go from a fast food restaurant for missing too many shifts. I was on a job and we needed to have a structural engineer come in and look at one of the floors to make sure it was stable enough. So we asked the owner's daughter if she had a contact number for the structural engineer her dad normally dealt with when having his buildings renovated. She was supposedly a business major who was going to take over her dad's company. She looks at the three of us, me, my assistant, superintendent, and the project manager, and says, "Oh, yeah, but he's busy working on my car at the moment." All three of us were just like, "What?" "Yeah, he's working on my engine in my car. Why do you guys need him? Engineers work on engines, not buildings." What the frick? Traveling in a car down a street looking for a particular shop. "So, which shop is it?"
"The one by the tree."
The road was lined with trees. In school, a physics teacher had asked one of my fellow students, who was holding a presentation on nuclear energy, "What is the Hadron Collider in Switzerland used for?" The response was so outrageously stupid, I was dumbfounded and cannot believe this happened to this day. She also wasn't joking. Nobody jokes with this teacher because no one had ever seen him laugh and he was a D-bag. My friend confidently said, "To create a second son." A doctor once asked my mum, "Are you vaccinating your 1-year-old son according to the chart I gave you?" The mum said, "Better than that, I'm breastfeeding him." This was in India last year. Didn't know this was happening in India too. In high school world history class, the teacher says, "All right everyone, we'll be covering the Reformation period. Who knows why Martin Luther was significant?" A student blurts out without raising a hand, "Martin Luther? Isn't that the guy who freed all the slaves?" This one holds a special place for me because it's multiple layers of wrong. Oh boy. You can see how he got there, which makes his wrongness all the more hilarious. Same name, bar a couple of syllables at the end. Black guy, equal rights, freed slaves? ? Stand up with a completely unearned air of competence and shout bingo. At the start of 2020, a volcano erupted in Batangas, a province in the Philippines. It affected my hometown, which frickin' sucked. What does our president suggest doing against the eruption? Give supplies? Help in the evacuation of the people stuck there? Provide relief and support? No. You want to know the answer? His words, not mine. "I will urinate on the volcano." Good job, President. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not so much a question, but my partner's dad is a doctor and is also from India originally. Also, he's lived in the UK since the 80s. A patient asked if he was worried about Brexit, and he said no, he's from India. It won't really affect him any more than it did before since India is in Asia. In absolute seriousness, the patient replies, "No, India must be in Europe. Asia is where China and Japan are." Hope this story fits here. I helped a friend, Bob, get hired working in the back room of a retail store. I was good friends with the manager, Tim, and I'd periodically check in to see how Bob was doing. I was a manager as well at the time at a different location. Tim was very pleased with Bob's work ethic and productivity. I talked to Bob and he said he was enjoying the job. After about 5 or 6 months, I got a call from Tim asking if I've talked to Bob recently. I replied no and asked if everything is okay. Tim informed me that Bob has been a no-call, no-show for about a week and he was worried about him. I immediately called Bob to see what was going on. Bob informs me that he decided to quit the job. In utter dismay and confusion, I shout, "What? Why? I vouched for you. Why would you do that without at least giving me a heads up?" He replied, "Man, every time someone new gets hired, they put them with me to train them, and that's not my job." Technically, he was right, it wasn't his job to train new hires, but what Bob didn't know is that managers did things like this to groom the associate into becoming a supervisor, gradually giving them more responsibilities over time. They did the same thing with me when I was coming up the ranks. He would have known this if he had called me before he decided to quit. Once I explained, I could hear the wires connecting in his brain. He apologized and asked if he could get his job back. I told him probably not since he left the way he did. Just because it's not your job now doesn't mean it won't be your job in the future. I saw a video of a guy asking people, "What's the hardest thing you've had to say in your life?" And most people replied with sad things, like telling their kids that their dog had passed away, they've had to divorce, relative passed, among other things. But one guy comes in and says it was the time he had to say Worcester sauce. Sure, it was funny, because he kept saying it wrong since it was the hardest thing for him to say, but it was such a dumb answer. It's still pretty frickin' funny though. I used to work in a video rental store that has since closed down. First week I worked there, a person asked, in store mind you, if we rented out movies. I didn't know what to do other than just stone-faced say, "Yes, of course we do." I wasn't sure if they were serious or not. I asked my ex-boss, an alcoholic piece of crap, if he knew how to do this thing on the system and could show me. He replied with, "Yes," and just went home. Just frickin' took off. I heard a lady ask at a Chinese takeout restaurant, "Is the orange chicken pork? The best part?" She was dead serious. One time, my friends and I were hanging out in his apartment. All of a sudden, I hear a whoosh and look over at my friend, and his hair is on fire. We got it out quickly, and I asked him what the heck just happened. He told me, "I was trying to listen to the sound the lighter made when I flicked it." I asked, "What's a street name that starts with N?" They answered, "Notorious B.I.G." Overheard in 11th grade English class, "What the frick is a syllable?" Works in IT, during a meeting at work. The project manager asks, "Okay, so how should we name this tension?" There was silence. A random guy in the back then shouts, "Susan!" A middle school music teacher asks the class why it's called a quarter note. One kid quite seriously replied, "Because they're worth 25 cents each." 5 years ago, I asked my now girlfriend on a date. Stupidly, she said yes. Now she's stuck with me. Astronomer here, maybe not quite the original post I had in mind, but it is depressing how many people will ask me a serious question about, say, black holes, hear the explanation and then dismiss it with a, "Yeah, but I don't believe in relativity," or whatever theory they dislike. Like, okay, I guess you can believe in whatever you want, but the universe isn't going to conform to that in how it works. And it goes without saying that these people have very rarely taken an actual physics class and understand what they're dismissing. They've just read some articles online and think they're now experts. I'm a high school teacher and I heard this one once. "What's Sudoku?" Deadpan, serious, and very condescending. "It's the highest form of when a Japanese ritually ends their life." How many is a Brazilian? Question. Name something that starts with the word pork. Capine. I'm sorry, I thought this was a forum for submitting stupid answers, not the most brilliant fricking thing that I've ever heard in my life. This kid's gonna be a literary genius or at the very least make a half-decent class clown. Not sure which. When I was a senior in high school, I was in National Honor Society and I used to be the lab assistant for Chemistry A and help grade tests. We were going over elements and compounds and the directions asked the student to clarify if the subject was an element or a compound. The teacher threw in pizza as a gimme question, and this guy literally wrote element as his answer. Even worse, he was irate when we marked it incorrect. He was the only one in all 3 classes to get that question wrong. I worked at a place that served coffee and ice cream. I asked a customer what she wanted to order, and she replied with, "Are your milkshakes cold?" A teacher in high school asked the class if anyone knew how many feet there were in a mile. Very seriously, a student answered, "Nobody knows that. It's impossible. Everyone has different-sized feet." While watching Frozen with a group of friends, my brother's girlfriend, 30 minutes in, looks confused and upset and looks me in the eyes and asks, "If their parents died, are they still sisters?" She had been thinking about it for 30 minutes. I had to console her and let her know that if her parents died, her sister would still be her sister. My teacher asked my friend during English class, "What's the prefix of sub?" He responded with, "way." We still give him crap for that. At our 9th grade science fair, 9th grade is the last year before graduation from school, in Denmark, I don't know how it is in the States, our last science exam went like this. My friend and I were teammates and we had it going pretty good. So, my teacher asked how wind was created, and my friend replied, "The tree's muscles make them swing from side to side, pushing air around, thus creating wind." What time is it? Not yet. It was biology, and the teacher called this guy, I'll call him Tim, to the board to answer a couple of questions for a grade. I'll skip straight to the point. She asked him how did a horse adapt to his living conditions. He answered with a long nose, strong legs, wings, and claws. I don't know if he was thinking about a griffin or a pegasus, but it was pretty funny. That's a pretty fair price if you look at the prices of trains, when trying to buy a used car. A kid got asked what 2 plus 2 was. He thought for a second and said 7 or 5. This was in 6th grade. I swear to God his age was higher than his IQ. I don't know if this counts because it's more of a dumb question. At work one day I was given a gift from a coworker. It was a bracelet with silver beads. The beads signified the dots and dashes for Morse code. In Morse code, the bracelet design spelled out, "Frick you." Another girl that we worked with asked me with a straight face, "Morse code is the same thing as sign language, right?" Another coworker who wasn't exactly bright chimed in and said, "Yes, it's the exact same thing with the hand signals." And I had to leave the room. From a beauty pageant, sadly I haven't been able to find a clip. What are your opinions on affirmative action?
Well, I believe we should be affirmative in all our actions.
To be fair, that's a question that's unfair to ask of smart people. That's just how it's always been. If you're traveling 80 miles per hour, how long does it take you to go 80 miles?
Well, if I run the mile in about 9 minutes…
Well, it was me who answered, but tell me now, how are we going to transport an entire freaking TV that is way bigger than we two combined downstairs without killing ourselves? Said my brother back when he was 17 and I was 12. To this day, I have no idea why our parents trusted us enough to move the TV downstairs, but then my 12-year-old self answered in a completely serious voice, "Fast and ably." I almost got pushed down the stairs for that. When Steven Gerrard, an English footballer, was asked his favorite type of cheese, he replied, "Melted." At school, I once asked a group, "Isn't it weird how we always eat chicken eggs but you never see turkey eggs? Why is that?" A girl looked at me like I was a complete moron and replied in a very condescending tone,
Turkeys are male chickens, so…
Back in the day when fax machines were the pinnacle of office technology, I had a coworker who was standing next to the fax looking distressed. I asked them what the problem was, and they responded that they couldn't make a copy of the document because the copier was broken. I said, "Why do you need to make a copy?" And they replied, "If this is faxed, then I won't have a copy. It'll get transferred through the fax." They actually thought the fax machine was like a transporter in Star Trek. Many years ago, I told a lady I was going to send her a Cat 5 cable to connect her computer to her home firewall. She said that was unacceptable because her dogs didn't get along with cats. When did you get into deep doo-doo for something you posted online? I worked at EA a couple of years back and saw a coworker get fired for posting pics, and a video if I recall, of the latest Battlefield on Reddit. A major breach of the NDA. They were threatening legal action but decided against it. Still, lost his job over it. It surprises me how people will just sign things and not read them. I started a job last April at a large corporation. One of the things I signed said I read through and understand the handbook, which is a 40-page manual. I told my boss I'd like to read through before signing it. In it, it very clearly goes over the NDA. Like I'm not allowed to admit to working for my company on any site, anon or not. I can't post anything about work on any social media. Like, if I said something like moving tables at work today in my restaurant job with an NDA, in theory, I could get fired. My friend and ex-coworker got fired from Guitar Center for doing an Ask Me Anything about working there. I posted a picture of a funny note at work a while back under a different username. It got tons of upvotes, but the paper was on top of something confidential. Some jerk Redditor decided it would be funny to enhance it and sent me a message letting me know he knew who I was and where I worked. I deleted the post, deleted that username, and started fresh with little to no information of my job or where I work, cause that freaked me out. Remember that guy who got fired from Google?
Was it the one where the guy was excited for his first day and posted a picture of his uniform and got fired immediately?
Well, he did sign an NDA, which he violated. I don't know if I'd call it trouble, but someone was able to figure out who I was. I've posted my picture on Reddit before, as well as details about the city where I live, but nothing else. They Facebook messaged me and threatened to come after me because they didn't like something I said. They were able to tell me where I was earlier that day at a particular time, which I definitely had not posted about, which was kind of creepy. I was scared for all of a day until I realized they were just bored and trying to freak me out. Nobody ever came for me. Yeah, the thing about those kinds of threats is that the vast majority of them are harmless, but you still need to be on your toes in case it's one of the minute number who are actually prepared to follow through on their threats and show up on your doorstep with a piece. Also, even if they aren't going to do it themselves, they still have a troubling amount of information about you, and they can distribute it to less scrupulous people. That crap is scary. Oh, yes. Reddit landed me a call with a Pittsburgh police detective. How he was able to figure out my cell phone number and my name from an anonymous Reddit account, I'll never know. A few months ago, I posted an image of a funny flyer I saw around my campus. Either to Reddit Pics or Reddit Funny, I forget. It was advertising a service called Friends of Minors that offered to buy booze for under 21s if they called the number printed on the flyer. Well, the number was the campus police. I knew that's why I thought the flyer was funny. I even put it in my title. It was obviously not made by the police, but a joke to get freshmen to call the police station and ask for booze. Well, I forgot I even posted it, but a few hours later I got a call on my cell phone from a blocked number. It was a detective from the Pittsburgh police asking for me by name. He said I recently uploaded an image from a website called Reddit that sparked a large wave of prank calls to the Pittsburgh police station and was interfering with the police's ability to handle real emergency situations that were occurring around the city that night. He told me I needed to remove that post immediately or alternative action would have to be taken against me. So I removed it immediately, obviously. Side note, it made the front page in like 3 hours. Wow. But I couldn't help but wonder why on earth people would simply see a phone number and immediately think, I should prank call this. I should prank call a police station. The freaking top comment on my post said something to the effect of, alright guys, you know what to do. Let's flood this police station with prank calls, then they'll be sorry. What the heck, guys? What the heck? In short, I posted an image of a flyer with the police station's number on it. Police station got tons of prank calls. I got a call from a detective demanding the post's removal. A girl posted on Reddit Trees that she was picking up her new boyfriend from the airport and posted some pictures of doobies, asking if she was doing it right. Well, her current boyfriend found the thread, not knowing he was being replaced, and that the guy was flying in and moving in that day. I remember hearing somewhere about a kid planning a school blasting who posted on Reddit about it. He got in real-life trouble for it, if I recall correctly. Yeah, he went to school with a high schooler that I work with. They eventually let him off the hook because they discovered he had no real means of harming students, but just wanted the day off school. I posted a picture of myself and someone found my Facebook. We had mutual friends, so he could see some of my private information, and then dug around and found some more. About 20 creepy personal messages later, I deleted everything and the account and made a new one. Lesson learned. And no, I don't think this will lead to him finding my account. I know a few other people personally that have the same problem I did. Thanks for your concerns, though. I didn't even have to post a picture, but someone on here didn't like a comment I made. It wasn't even directed at them, and they stalked all of my previous comments, tried to hunt me down online, threatened me, and wouldn't stop talking to me over my previous Reddit account. No lessons learned in my case, since I already knew that people were psychotic buttholes. So this topic is making me want to never ever post anything on Reddit ever again? Fair enough. I'm pretty sure that the general consensus is that all women on the internet are men, all children on the internet are FBI agents, all FBI agents are children, and roughly half of the men on the internet are women. Under an anonymous account I had, I posted something about my marriage, looking for advice. The advice I got, because it was a one-sided story, ended with, "Your husband sounds like a butthole." My husband isn't a butthole, he's a great guy, and he found the post, knew it was mine, and was hurt. He didn't leave me, but his feelings were needlessly injured. He's a great guy who doesn't deserve that. I immediately deleted the account. My husband's feelings are worth more to me than all the useless internet points. A lot of the power users on Reddit would be fricked if their identities got out. I once made a comment on Reddit that got so many upvotes that it showed up on my Facebook feed. I made some comment very subtly suggesting it was me, and someone figured it out. I had to delete my account ASAP because of all the weird stuff I'd said on it. My ex once dug through my history and found a post from like a year prior. Something creepy along the lines of, "Does anyone else look through the history of female Reddit users to find hot pics?" or something like that. It was a pretty tough thing to try and justify. She was like, "That's really creepy." I could only say, yeah, it is. Creepy internet justifications are the toughest of justifications.
Female here. I just assume the majority of guys do this. Oh, and I'll save you time. There are no pictures on my account.
Maybe not quite the answer that this thread is looking for, but I've been to a few Reddit meetups in my city. It's great, we always have fun and I enjoy hanging out with other local Redditors here. But I wonder if anything would change if they knew that I was a teetotaling Christian. I mean, my faith and my abstinence from alcohol has never been an issue, but they're overwhelmingly secular and very drunk. It's fine, not everyone can be allured by the secular ways. In all honesty, the narrator has read a lot of Reddit posts for his job, and honestly can say that his opinion on how open-minded the people of Reddit can be has become a lot more positive. Of course, there are still extreme crapsacks from every side of the political and religious spectrum willing to dole out extreme judgment on Reddit, but a lot of nice people too. My husband. He left his account open and I found his username. I didn't know he had a whole internet persona, as he's not into computers or internet. At least that's what I thought. I googled his username and hacked into an old email account. He told me he was just trolling when he was searching for men in our area to have fun bedroom times with, and swears that he never acted on it, and never gave out personal info. Then I found the email where he gave out his phone number. He swears he doesn't remember, it wasn't important and it was just trolling. We're now in counseling and divorce is still prominently on the table. In short, husband created an internet persona so real that it may cause my divorce. To answer some questions, yes, I knew his password as he uses the same one for everything. I thought saying hacked would be a brief way to say this. Second, he's not gay, he's bi. He's slept with many other women and had one encounter with a man that I know of. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that he is or was or wanted to cheat on me. It doesn't matter what orientation you are. When you stand up and promise that you don't want anyone else but this person for the rest of your life, you should mean it. And finally, no. I didn't expect cheating before I found this persona. I trusted him completely and thought he trusted me, and knew that I was open to him being bi. We'd looked at certain kinds of adult material as well as hetero stuff together before. No big deal. I thought we had an honest relationship, which is where the hurt comes from. I don't know if he hasn't fully accepted himself or if the lies were indeed about what he claimed he was really hiding, which was cheating on his best friend with his best friend's girl. I almost got myself and my former friend sued for a picture that I posted. I had to delete my Reddit account and write a formal letter of apology to the person who wanted to sue me and my friend. The only lasting damage was that one of my former best friends now hates me, although it's a little bit justified because he almost got expelled from his school for it. Yeah, this happened to me. I called someone a gay slur and my mum made me say sorry. Hey, calling someone a cigarette is no laughing matter. I am a filmmaker and have been to Sundance, among other places. After the oil spill in the Gulf, BP called me up to ask that I make a series of pro-BP documentaries about how BP is awesome and nothing is really that bad in the Gulf. They offered a lot of money for budget and compensation. I was torn. I freaking hated this company, and the stuff that I was seeing in the Gulf infuriated me. So what did I do? I sought out advice on Ask Reddit about the pros and cons of taking this job. In the end, it was decided that I at least attend their first meeting to hear what they had to say. My Reddit post went up at 10 p.m. and at 9 a.m. I went in to meet the BP folks. They had printed out copies of my entire Reddit thread. Consequently, I left the building fast and didn't get the job, and I don't regret it at all. Thanks, Reddit. Classic BP, wasting a bunch of paper when they could have just as easily told you they saw it or showed you the post on a phone. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My now ex-girlfriend found out my account and saw that I'd spoken about her, anonymously of course, on the internet. She got pretty mad at me, and I got pretty mad at her for snooping on me like that. She said something like, "Most of the stuff you say is really funny," which really made me mad since it indicated she had been monitoring my activity. Reddit is sometimes like a personal journal to me and isn't really meant to be known to the people who are actually in my life. I doubt she still reads my account, but she still knows this one and could easily be reading this right now. So I don't know if anyone will believe me or if a mod there can confirm, but since 2008 or 9-ish, a couple of months after Reddit Philly started having meetups, I counted the number of Fs and Us in FU comics. I registered the subreddit name Reddit FU under my old name, Keyboard Duder. I was the only admin. I planned on making a few comics and letting people post their own. I sat on it for a while. Me and my girlfriend at the time got into an argument and I, like an idiot, used my normal account, with 2 years veterancy, a crap ton of karma and local subreddit presence, to make a post asking advice on the relationship. We talked later that night and out of nowhere she says, "Why don't you tell your friends on Reddit?" And it hit me that she was stalking my comments. She had plenty of quotes from people she ran by me too, and deleted a ton of comments which I foolishly said in passion, and I deleted my account too, because the name was tainted with a stalker. I wouldn't be surprised if this one was too. Years later, I look in retrospect and realize it was the dumbest thing I could have done with the account, even if it was the most convenient for the community, because the subreddit is bigger and better than I could have ever made it. But I feel so dumb. It's like I took my chips out right before I was going to win. I don't care if anyone believes me, I just want to make peace with it. Storytime. This year on Reddit, I posted a picture of me holding a log of number 2 and some bottles of my number 1 in my closet fort. All of the pictures have since been deleted from Reddit to save my identity further, but the damage has already been done. Fast forward 3 months from posting. I'm talking to a friend via IRC, which is Internet Relay Chat, when I link to my GitHub, which is a programming repository page. From there, he finds my blog, Google+, school, schedule, teacher, and the school email address of my teacher, and posts most of the information in the IRC channel. The next day, my programming teacher asks who had been mailing him asking about Black Joe, which is my IRC nickname, and who had been emailing him inappropriate pictures, threatening suspension for whoever was responsible. Thankfully, none of the images had my face in them, and I was never caught, but I came really close to being in deep crap. In short, crap, closets, blog, school. I feel like the author here hasn't properly explained why he took a picture of himself holding a big old chocolate log and the bottles of off-brand lemonade. And despite how gross it is, now that we've brought it up, I'm kind of insanely curious as to why and how this all came about. I'll never know, I guess. Back when I played World of Warcraft, I turned the guild's main tank in for a completely reprehensible real-life crime he'd committed in the guild chat. All I can say on YouTube is that it's one of the worst crimes you can do, and he certainly did time for it. The moderators instantly banned his account, and the guild leader kicked me and actually went to a lawyer to see if he could sue me for ruining the guild's endgame progression. I didn't find out about the lawyer until nearly 2 years later when one of the former guild officers told me about it. I thought he was yanking my chain until he started quoting case law about suing fictional characters. So I asked around and found a few other people who had been in the guild, and they all confirmed the story. That's when I said goodbye to all of my friends and logged out for the last time. It'll be 3 years in March. I had to dish out the trouble when I found my younger cousin's exposed photos she had posted on Gone Wild. Not cool. Not cool at all. If I recall correctly, there was an Ask Me Anything about 8 months ago of a dude claiming to be in the Air Force and doing something involving nuclear weapons, unloading them on planes or something. Turns out he was for real, and a number of people came very close to doxing him and actually did dox his commanding officer unless he took it down. In short, don't talk about your job handling nukes on Reddit. After a really confusing kind of breakup, I posted to Reddit Relationships asking for help, using my real account specifically so she'd know if it was me if she saw it. I explained the whole situation leading up to it. They all went off on how much of a terrible person she was, and how I should run far away and I should never stick my Johnson in crazy. A few hundred comments worth, it was front-paged. Some pretty specific insults towards her too. She saw it, she read it, and she realized it was her. She felt terrible. I felt almost as bad that she had to see what people had to say. She wasn't a bad person, and I can't explain the feelings when I got that text from her. We saw each other a few times after that and shared our I love yous and goodbye kisses, but I never got to apologize. Ali, if you're out there, I got over hating you. You only meant well. All the best to you in life. Thanks for the memories and experiences. I hope you and your husband are doing better and that he doesn't still want me dead. I posted a link to a friend's Facebook of a post I made on Reddit, and my ex-girlfriend saw it and read through like months and months of my comments and submissions. There was one from a long time ago that says something like, "My roommate's girlfriend annoys me slightly. She told her and I got yelled at. It wasn't too bad though. Me and my former roommate's girlfriend are really close now." There was a guy who lost his job at Google when he outed that they'd be selling Chromebooks, or whatever they call them, in the last year. This one wasn't on Reddit, but game FAQs. I said, I wanna bang this one girl, and they requested pictures, so I posted the direct link to Facebook. They found her and told her. Super awkward. I posted a picture of my workplace, and a general manager from across the country saw it and reported it to corporate and my general manager. I was supposed to be fired that night, but because of the people I work with, I wasn't. I won't post any details as I don't want them finding out. Deleted my account and the post. Good thing I kept my job because I got into an accident recently and have to pay $3,400 in repairs. Without that job, I'd be screwed. I only make minimum wage. Another forum I posted in a relationship subforum about me and my current girlfriend, about the issues we had, among other things. She saw the thread and we broke up because of that. She checked out my profile and figured out it was me. My ex posted a picture of her and I, doing something after we'd broken up. We were both dating other people at the time. My girlfriend at that time was also a Redditor. She was not very happy after she saw that. I kinda got the opposite. My girlfriend looked at my subscribed subreddits and found out I was subscribed to splooge working girls and later let me splooge all over her. Positive result. Oh shoot, I can't find the story anywhere, but it was in Florida, where a Redditor whose dad was a detective leaked details about an investigation where a teenager snatched a little girl and tried to leave, but ended up not making it out. Police were looking into filing some kind of charges, but since the detective's son leaked really important details, they had to drop the case. I wonder whatever happened to that kid. A coworker asked for my Reddit username. No one in real life knows either this one or the other one I have. I thought that was the whole point. If you follow people you know, isn't that just glorified Facebook? That's what intrigues me about Reddit. I think I'm in the minority, but anyone else not like the people they know having their username? I posted a rant on how my now ex-girlfriend's mother was an outright B-word and how much I hated her. It was relevant to a topic. And I mean, I tore her apart in this post, describing how she treats me, her daughter, and everyone around her. Well, then my girlfriend ended up wanting to be cute and beat my karma score, so she started up a Reddit account randomly without me knowing and searched up my account. I used the same username for everything I go on, and she saw my post. Did I mention she's my ex now? That's relevant to this topic. I made a post after a fight with my girlfriend about how ignorant she was and how her parents kind of sucked at being parents. Now, she's not an ignorant person in general, I was just mad at the time, and her parents aren't crappy, but they were definitely being crappy that week. Anyway, she saw that I signed into Reddit but didn't know that I had an account. She found my post history, read that comment, and a crapstorm ensued. She thought that I thought that she was stupid. False. She thought that I hated her parents. Very much false. She was also teed off that I told the world about those problems, even though no one on Reddit knows who I am, and therefore no one knew who I was referring to. That was a stressful couple of days. I shared my shock at the discovery of the fact that an ex of mine believes in ghosts. At first, she was upset for being made fun of on the internet, but it turned into a healthy conversation about beliefs and being judgmental, and we both gained something out of the conversation. One time, I commented with the "What the frick did you just say?" copy pasta and left my browser window open with the PC on sleep mode. A few days later, my mum comes to me with this disheartened and horrified look on her face with a printed out screenshot of the comment thread demanding an explanation for my ridiculous threats and profanity and lots of other things. Keep in mind that she's the stereotypical religious mum of Reddit atheism's meme posts. I tried for a really long time to explain the concept of a copy pasta, but it just didn't work. What if the colleges saw this? She cried. And to her point, if colleges got a hold of my comment history, I'd be screwed for worse reasons than the internet tough guy meme. I almost got sued by this girl I made a meme of. She said if I didn't take the meme down, she'd sue me and report me for bullying, getting me suspended from high school and ruining my shot at college. However, the meme still lives on some websites, and my school paper wrote an article about me. How did you scar someone for life? My sister used to sleep with this giant stuffed dog that was probably 4 feet long. She'd put it on the right side of the bed and cover the dog with a blanket so it looked like a body pillow. Anyways, in 5th grade, I thought it would be funny to play a prank on my little sister. I took out the dog and I climbed into her bed and covered myself with the blanket where the stuffed dog usually was while she went to talk to my mum. My sister comes back and climbs into bed to sleep while I'm laying in the bed with her without her knowing. It's dark in the room. I lay there in silence for maybe about 3 minutes when I finally go, "Hey." She literally screamed at the top of her lungs and ran out of her room so fast that she knocked over everything along the way to my mum's room. It was probably one of the funniest moments of my life. However, I did scar my sister so badly that to this day, and she's 20 now, before she climbs into bed, she always removes the blanket to check if anything is underneath. Needless to say, she almost had a panic attack watching The Grudge. You guys know the scene I'm talking about. So, what have the rest of you done that scarred someone for life? I just learned this month that one of my 3 sisters is afraid of vampires. I had accidentally tripped the breakers in the house one night while my parents were out, and I was watching them. I was 12 and my sisters all gathered in the back room, the only one that still had power. I saw this as an opportunity and targeted the youngest, who was 6. I told her that I'd cut off the power intentionally and that I was a vampire. I told her that I intended to eat her, and as I did this, I suddenly leaned in close and bared my teeth. All 3 of my sisters screamed, and the elder 2 fled the room, each out of opposite doors. The youngest, abandoned, instantly burst into tears and grabbed the nearest weapon, a serious pair of scissors off a side table. As she lunged, screaming at my chest, I saw the fear and determination in her face, and I ran. I passed up my other 2 sisters on the way out and locked myself in one of the bathrooms. I screamed my confession of the joke immediately and begged my other sisters to calm her down. I learned that apparently the single light in the room had managed to shine red across my eyes at just the right moment and throw terrifying shadows across my face. Oddly enough, it was actually the second youngest that was scarred by this, refusing to watch a vampire movie to this day. I never threatened the youngest again. I went over to my friend's house. Right when I walked in, I could hear him doing the dishes. I walked by the kitchen and his back was to me, so I walked into the kitchen and just stood behind him. Like a foot behind him. I honestly have no idea how he couldn't have at least sensed me there. Then I just stood there smiling, waiting for him to turn around. After about a minute, he finally turned around and did one of those no-sound screams where he just inhaled loudly for about 5 seconds. He was also, thankfully, just washing his last spoon and not his last knife, because he spun the spoon around in his hand to stabbing position. It was honestly close to the hardest I've ever laughed. What got me was the silent scream and the look of absolute horror on his face. He says he still gets a little edgy when he's alone in the house washing dishes, or when he thinks he's alone. Well, I feel like this is as far as you should take this one, because your friend is now going to absolutely shank you if you are ever found to be standing behind him again. I've also done this to the same person a few too many times in a row, and now move deliberately, loudly around the house in the fear that the next time I surprise him may be my last. Best of luck to you.
This one happened to me. My older cousin once told me that when you flush the toilet, a monster will come out, and the only way to be safe is to enter another room before the flushing noise stops, because the doorway is a barrier. Even long after I stopped believing it, I kept doing this out of habit. Flushing the toilet still gives me a sense of impending danger and a desire to leave the room really quickly.
When I was 6, my parents took me to the Natural History Museum that featured a dinosaur exhibit with a T-Rex that would move its head and roar. In my mind, the sound of the toilet flushing was very similar to that of a T-Rex roaring. So clearly flushing the toilet would alert a T-Rex in the area, and it would come running over to eat me. From then on, I would make sure I was all done, pants buttoned up, door open, hands washed before flushing the toilet, and then I'd run the frick out and slam the door behind me. It only applied to our second-floor bathroom though, because the window in that room was the perfect height for a T-Rex's head to take a peek inside. Any other toilet was fine to flush, so I only got the urge at my parents' house to look out the window to check for random dinosaurs gallivanting around. I threw the frisbee for my dog and she kicked up a stick that stabbed her belly while running for it. She's deathly afraid of frisbees now. One day, when I was about 5, my dad brought home a pack of gummy bears that he got at work. He shared them with me, of course, but I kept playing with them. The way they reformed themselves after being crushed was oddly amusing until he told me that when you eat them, they'll reform in your stomach and climb out of your throat. Then he leaned in and whispered, "And they're gonna remember who did that to them." I still can't eat those darn things. My brother and I shared a room growing up. I'm a side sleeper, so I'd always be facing his bed as I drifted off to sweet slumber. Somehow, as my eyes slowly opened and closed, he could time it perfectly that I would close my eyes, open them, and behold, there he was at the foot of my bed. I still have trouble falling asleep, and we don't even share a room anymore. So I used to share a room with my sister when we were about 7. So one day before bedtime, I decided to draw a dog on the ceiling. Yeah, I was a little brat, and I justified it to my sister with, it'd be the first thing I'd see when I wake up, and then my day would be great. The cartoon dog turned out so great that my sister begged me to draw her one. I agreed and started drawing, but it wasn't a dog. It was a scary mother-frickin' onion man. It looked like a melting onion face. I don't know why I drew it. It really messed her up. She had nightmares about him, and my parents moved her out to a different room. In short, I drew a scary onion man above my sister's bed. She refuses to buy me Christmas presents to this very day. I should clarify that it was about 14 years ago and it's long since been painted over. As I remember, it looked exactly like a grumpy, rotting onion face. Just imagine an onion face, then imagine it decomposed and grumpy. My brother still flinches every time a butterfly flies by because I told him they were poisonous. He's almost 18 now. I waited for my dog to come through the dog door, and when I saw him on his merry way, I stuck my head out of it and screamed, "Boo!" He's never used that dog door again. Damn me, now I have to let him out all the time. My brother came into the bathroom when I was having a bath at about 4 years of age. He asked if I'd like to hear a story and then proceeded to tell me a horrifying story about monsters. As he neared the end of the story, he turned off the light switch and said, "If you put one foot out of the bath, the monsters will get you." He shut the door, leaving me alone in the pitch-black bathroom. The water got colder and colder, but I didn't move a muscle. Mum found me there about 3 hours later, scared stiff and crying. Screw everything about baths. I had an awesome Labrador growing up. The nicest, friendliest, happiest dog I've ever known. We were at my aunt's house when he was about 2, and he saw a horse for the first time. He went to investigate and was carefully smelling the horse through the fence, bringing his nose up to meet the horses. When his metal choke collar touched the electric fence, he yelped and ran and turned into a trembling, slobbering mess anytime he saw a horse for the rest of his life. I did not expect this many stories about people traumatizing their poor doggos when I began writing this script for the video. They're delicate animals and apparently very prone to learning way too much from their mistakes. Poor poochies. I hope your gentle souls were soothed by the eating of many treats. When I was in 6th grade, we were studying surface tension. I thought it was really fascinating and started asking my teacher all kinds of questions. I guess my eagerness was annoying because when I asked Mrs. Vance why soap would break the surface tension of water and how it worked, she rolled her eyes at me. "You know, Susan, if you'd start washing your hands after you go to the bathroom, you wouldn't have to worry about things like that." The class laughed at me and teased me for weeks. That one moment completely changed the way that I did school. Instead of asking questions in class, I remained pretty silent unless forced to talk, and I started memorizing textbooks to avoid feeling that way in class ever again. I recently did this to my significant other. I waited until he was going into his room, the light was off, and I hid next to the light switch and cupped my hand over it. He went to turn on the light, felt my hand, and freaked the F out. He's a big man with a deep voice, sounds like Peter Steele. He went up about 8 octaves and squealed like a little girl. Fricking hilarious. He now sticks his head into the room before turning on the light. Next time he does this, I'm going to put my hand over his face. Hehehehe. My older brother loves to stay up late and play video games in our basement. One night we had a scary movie marathon with the lights off. When we were done, I pretended to go upstairs and hid behind our sofa. After about 10 minutes of playing games, I whisper, "Do you want to play a game?" I have never seen him move that fast in his life. He still refuses to play video games late at night 6 years later. I remember thinking when I was younger about how spontaneous death is after the death of my grandfather. Now, whenever I leave somebody's room or house, Or whatever, I say something incredibly kind to them. That way, if they do die, the last thing I've said will have been awesome. From the time when I was about 3, my big brother told me all sorts of bugs and earwigs would get inside my ears while I slept, and they'd eat my brain. He went into horrible details of how they'd reach my eyes and slowly eat them, and it would be the most painful experience of my life. I sleep with a blanket over my head at all times and wake up in the morning to check my ears the very first thing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One day when I was about 7, my little brother being about 5, my mum took me, my brother, and my friend to a carpet and fabric store for some improvement project she was doing. Us kids wandered off and started exploring this maze of carpet walls, and in the middle of our exploring, my friend and I shot each other a look that it was time to mess with the young one. Immediately we both scream, "Oh my god, it's here!" and take off running. My brother has no idea what's going on, but instantly starts panicking. He's running, trying to catch up with us, and is freaking out, saying, "What? What is it?" My friend and I stop to catch our breath, and we look up at the top of the maze as if we were making sure that we were safe from some danger. We then tell him that we saw the African killer moth, a rare species of moth that grows from eggs planted in exotic fabrics, and that one bite from the moth can be deadly. My brother goes pale, and just as he's about to ask us something, I look up and yell, "Oh my god, it's back!" as my friend and I take off running and ditch my now crying and fearing for his life brother. This goes on about another 10 minutes until my mum finds us and yells at us all for being stupid. All fine and dandy, or is it? Cut to a couple of years back when I'm a senior in high school and my brother's a sophomore and the whole family's hanging out in the living room. Me, him, mum, and dad. We're all talking and suddenly a huge mother of a moth flies in and starts running into the ceiling lights. My brother turns white. My dad and I are laughing at how big the thing is and how we're going to need a bowl just to catch it. Meanwhile, my brother is just on the brink of losing it. My mum and dad are brainstorming how to get out when I just say, "It's easy, we just turn off all the lights except one and it'll head towards that one." My brother flips, just loses it. "No!" He breaks down and starts crying as he runs into his room and slams the door, screaming the whole time. Yeah, I traumatized my little brother. Not quite scarred, but my sister hates every time we retell the story. I think I was about 12 and my brother was 10. My mum and 3-year-old sister went out to run errands while my brother and I stayed behind. While they were gone, we took my sister's favorite toy, a stuffed lamb named Lammy, and put the shredded up top of a white tube sock around its neck. Like Lammy was wearing a collar made of shredded up sock. We stuck Lammy's body in between the couch cushions, but left its head exposed with the shredded sock collar visible. We scattered some of my mum's cotton balls around and voila! It looks like Lammy's severed head was waiting to greet them on the couch. When my sister came home, she let out a quiet, "Who did this?" and immediately burst into tears. We were grounded, she was fine, and at 31 years old, I still feel like a complete jerk. We totally got her though. Huh? I mean, yeah, you basically staged the murder of a loved one as a prank on an infant, so it is funny, but yeah, you don't get to pass through the pearly gates unless you've passed some more tests to prove that your conduct has reversed lately. My brother and one of his friends used to sit in his room and mess around on a Ouija board. It freaked out my grandma, who was extremely superstitious, really badly, so my dad and I decided the seances had to stop. I recruited one of my friends from college, who my brother had never met, and got a pair of pure black contacts. I had my friend put them in and hide in my brother's room. Note that on a TV show my brother watches, characters who are being possessed usually appear with black eyes. When my brother and his friend started using the board, he popped out at them and started hissing. Brother and friend ran screaming out of the house and refused to sleep in his room until I finally told him it had been a prank a month or so later. In short, I tricked my 13-year-old brother into believing that Satan had materialized in his bedroom. My older brother used to play this really fun game whenever we were in a swimming pool together. He'd pretend he was the shark and I would pretend I was a panicky, screaming 5-year-old who could barely swim. Then he'd pull me under the water. 20 years later and I still hate swimming. Older brothers, we love you, but F you. Sincerely, your better looking and more successful younger brothers. Scaring people once is funny. Making them live in fear is hilarious. Keep in mind that I weigh more than 250 pounds. My brother, age 20, has always been kinda jumpy. He says it's good reflexes, but it's just skittishness. I decided to help him with the problem. Over the past 2 years, I've hidden in virtually every nook and corner of our house. In closets, under furniture, inside cabinets. Places a big old fatty like myself should not be able to fit. Every time he thinks he's found all the hiding spots, I find a new one. I've hidden under and even in his bed only to jump out and scare him crapless. He lives in a world of paranoia when he gets home. At night when he reads in bed, at regular intervals he gets up and checks around the room with a flashlight to make sure that I'm not there hiding in the darkness. He even checks the closet multiple times a night to make sure I somehow didn't sneak into it when he closed his eyes just for a second. All of this is leading up to my final hiding place. He doesn't know it yet, but I brought a mattress that I'm storing at a friend's house. Slowly I've been carving a me-shaped hole in it, and I'm going to replace his mattress with it, cover myself in a mattress topper, and the moment he lies down in bed, his mattress will get him. There's this dumb kid who dropped out of high school who likes me. And I mean really likes me. We're both in our 20s now, but he's completely obsessed with me. He has absolutely no life plans, and he's stuck in a plumbing business with his younger, but slightly more attractive, if I have to admit, brother. He makes no effort to get his life together at all. He likes to think that I'm his girlfriend, and he tells that to everyone he knows. He always tries to put his arm around me and make a move, even though I'm fiercely trying to tell him that I have no interest in him whatsoever. And that's not even the worst part. He's a heavy substance user, and I mean frickin' heavy. He does so many shrooms that I'm kind of surprised he has the money to eat, not to mention paying the bills. The bottom line is the dude is insane. I have a boyfriend. He's really big and muscular, and I like him a lot. His only flaw is he's a bit aggressive, and occasionally he'll take me out to lunch or to a movie date or something, but God forbid the dumb kid finds out, because if he finds out, he sets out to find me. For some reason, he thinks that my boyfriend is trying to kill me secretly or something. I don't know what he thinks. But it would pretty much scar him for life if I told him this flat out, and that I don't want him, and that I already have a boyfriend and he's not kidnapping me. That's why I never tell him. He's messed up as it is already. I don't want to drive him to self-deletion. I just wish Mario would leave me alone, and I wish his moronic brother Luigi would stop helping him. When I was little, I had a blue bear, whose name was creatively Blue Bear. Well, Blue Bear did nothing to anyone, ever, primarily because he's an inanimate object. Parents were away, and of course my brothers torment me. It was winter and they told me he was cold, so they set him on fire. But then he was too hot, so they buried him in snow. Then he got too cold, so they cut his head off. Yeah, I don't get that logic either. He's fine though, my mum fixed him up and he's still sleeping with me at the ripe age of 25. Brothers are horrible creatures. I was an unplanned C-section. That counts as scarring someone for life, right? That's a very literal interpretation of our subject here, but actually your mother in all honesty probably didn't relish this memory either, so I'd say you probably fit the criteria. Well done. My brother is horrified of walking past beds, because when he was 5 he was going to get some clothes from our mum's room. I heard him coming up the stairs, so I ran into my mum's room and hid under her bed. He came in and walked past the bed, and I grabbed his ankles and pulled him under the bed. He was horrified. Now he always checks under beds before walking near them, and he hops into bed because he's afraid he might get pulled under. I'm a horrible older sister. My brother had this issue in the bathroom where he has to open the shower curtain every time he goes to take care of business. So one time, I put his giant stuffed tiger in there and waited about 2 hours. I suddenly heard the single girliest scream I've ever heard come out of another male's mouth, and he was running down the hallway. Many laughs were had and jimmies were rustled. I was on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds about 8 years ago, and my buddy's girlfriend kept asking if she could get my other hit over and over again, and I finally asked, "Have you ever tripped before?" She didn't. Anywho, she eventually got it, and everything was fine when we were listening to music in her room with my friend until she stopped talking and kept shaking her hair. She thought she was mildly bugging out, but it got worse. She started shrieking and shaking her hair more violently, and my friend didn't know what to do about his scared crapless tripping girlfriend, and neither did I. My trip was wearing off, my reality set in while witnessing someone else's reality fade out of orbit. Screaming, louder and louder, Her mum enters the scene, and I'm literally backing up to the window to make an observation to see if I could jump 3 stories. She's still mute, besides screaming, and her mum is terrified, and so am I. My friend tells me that he thinks someone put something in her beer at the party that we didn't go to. She asks us to leave, and we did. She was fine, and slept it off. She told us that she thought spiders were all over her head, and an unexplained force kept her from talking. She thinks it was a bad ghost. Her and my friend broke up several years later, and during that time she kept checking her hair for spiders, and how she was scared of total darkness, 'cause that's when the demons come out. I've not seen her in several years, but I think she's still messed up because I dosed her up and gave her a trippy critter nightmare from hell. In short, I gave a girl some pretty strong substances, and she thought spiders and demons were consuming her, and now she checks her hair every day a lot, and is scared of the dark. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.